The diner wasn't what we expected. In contrast to its dilapidated signage and rundown exterior covered with peeling paint from ancient history, the inside was well lit and fairly clean. Its age did show, with some tiles cracked, a couple of light bulbs dimmer than others, and patches of the ceiling stained with mildew. But it was cozy and reminded me of the diners my family used to visit when I was a kid. Another surprise was the number of people here. It had a lot of customers. I didn't really note the vehicles parked outside, just that there were a couple of trucks and cars. The old lady wearing a patchy yellowed apron making coffee could be the owner. A younger woman with a similarly designed newer-looking apron, logo, colors and all, must be her daughter based on their looks. On the other side of the counter sat a stout middle-aged man reading a newspaper. At the end of the row, a couple of old men conversed with each other over cups of coffee. A family occupied one of the diner booths. I couldn't see how many children the parents had with them because the back of the booth blocked my view. Lastly, on the furthest table sat 3 burly men in checkered shirts who were probably truckers. All of them stared at us when we entered. We did look out of place, 2 girls who could be on their way to some college party that got lost. I suppressed a grin as I realized Dean and I appeared like the perfect cast for a slasher horror flick, the clueless girls who usually got murdered first by the deranged serial killer. We looked at them too, Dean standing strong and confident as if she frequented this diner for years. The people all went back to what they were doing and ignored us. I raised a brow. No one was rude. Not even a single catcall at Dean. Hearing the blasting music and a loud engine coming closer, the 2 of us hurried to find seats. I hoped those assholes wouldn't mess with Dean's car. We picked the furthest booth, 2 places down from the family with kids, and near the table of the truckers. They might be of help if the drunk frat boys harassed us in our weakened state. The waitress with extensively curled hair came to our table and handed out menus. "What'll it be, girls?" she drawled, taking the pen tucked behind her ear and poised to write on a small notepad. Dean stared at the menu then looked at me. She did it a couple more times, hinting that I order for her. "It's all food," I thought exasperatedly, "everything is edible." Of course, she didn't have telepathic powers to know what was on my mind. She kept doing that stupid eye-flicking thing. I gave her a slight nod to confirm I got her message. Looking up at the waitress, I asked, "Do you have tea?" "None of those fancy tea leaves kind of stuff," she replied with a shrug. "Probably a box of tea bags left in the cabinet." "I'm fine with that." "Is that tea for 2? "Just 1. My friend will have coffee." "Do you have honey?" Dean said, raising her hand as if to recite in class. "Can you please use honey instead of sugar to sweeten the coffee?" "Honey? We ain't no bee farm, dear." "Oh, just sugar then." "Wait, I'll have it black." "What else?" I adjusted my glasses as I ran a finger down the offerings on the menu. "We'll have a grilled cheese sandwich." "Can you slice it into 2, please?" "We'll share it." "Waffles too, just a plate, the option with chickens on top." "We ain't got no honey to go with that, okay?" The waitress interrupted. Dean looked away, a hint of an embarrassed blush on her cheeks. "Only maple syrup." She pointed at a bottle in the middle of the table beside the hot sauce. "The hot sauce too, if that's your thing." "I love maple syrup," I assured her. Scratching my chin, I wondered what else to get. I hadn't been inside a diner in ages. It made me feel a bit nostalgic about the family road trips we used to have before Dad disappeared, and we became a family of 2. A bit surprising that this was on my mind. "I think we'll also get hash browns and a slice of apple pie." "You girls hungry?" "A bit, yeah. And we'll be resting here so might as well enjoy the good food." I gave her a smile like the polite and well-mannered lady that I was. "That's all we'll get. Or maybe we can," and I didn't get to decide whether to ask if milkshakes were available because of a loud crash. Everyone in the diner jolted in surprise as the door opened with a bang. The tiny arch windows rattled, threatening to pop off. The wooden door frame creaked as if it was about to break. 6 assholes piled in. In the lead was the guy with the skull tattoo on his arm. What did I decide to call him again? Skull tattoo bro or something? The twig-like man sporting a disgrace of a goatee followed him, still holding a beer can, its contents dripping on the floor. I also spotted the unkempt brown-haired kid that Dean mentioned was the nephew of the mayor trailing their group, timidly shuffling his feet. His eyes were cast on the floor as if he didn't want to be with the other idiots. If I were to guess, I'd say the 3 older guys in front were upperclassmen and senior frat members, while those 3 at the back were all freshmen and pledges of their organization. The old lady behind the counter peered over her glasses at the newcomers. She grabbed the mop and told them, "Don't be making a mess here." "Hey, girls!" Skull Tattoo Bro loudly called out to us, ignoring the old lady. He waved with a creepy leer on his face. "Where are your manners, guys?" he said to his bastard pack, his words slurring. "Say hello to Blondie and her friend." All of them greeted us with varying levels of enthusiasm, the freshies less so than the older guys. So, I'm the friend, I thought, mildly entertained and surprised that they noticed me. "If you're not gonna eat here, then you better scram." The old lady quickly left the counter and strode forward to block Skull Tattoo Bro and the rest of the rabble. She tightly grasped the handle of the mop, shoving it towards them. She surprisingly had a loud and clear voice and was quite spry despite her age. "Don't be staying here if you're not customers." The 2 older men sitting on the bar stools turned to face them too, ready to help her out if the situation got out of hand. The leader of the asshole pack raised his hands and put on an innocent face. "Calm down, Granny. We're customers. We got money, and we're buying food. Isn't that right, guys?" he said, looking over his shoulder. There was a murmur of agreement. "See, Granny. We're here to eat. You must have good food if Blondie over there chose to go here." "Then what are you having?" grumbled the old lady as she parted the group with her mop, cleaning up the mess of goatee guy. "And throw that can away." The jerk squad gathered by the counter to read the menu above the red-tiled backsplash of the sink. Skull Tattoo Bro said, "I'll be having a cheeseburger." "That's 6 cheeseburgers, yeah. Wings. What else do you guys want?" Dean heaved a sigh. This must be a common problem for her. While I couldn't sympathize with her specific situation, I didn't know how to sympathize at all. I could relate to her annoyance at being bothered. The world had been doing that to me a lot lately. "Do you know them?" asked the waitress, nudging her head towards the monkeys trying to order food. "No," I said. "Those drunk guys saw us like 10, maybe 15 minutes from here, and decided to follow us. We don't know why." Thanks," I said, uncertain of the appropriate response. "Thank you very much," said Dean with sincerity in her voice. "Really, it means a lot." The waitress gave us a salute. "Just your friendly diner in the middle of nowhere. I'll be right back with your food." After they finished ordering, the 6 dumbass somehow managed to reach a table despite their drunken state. To be fair, it was the upperclassmen who were mostly wasted and maybe high on drugs too. The freshies could still walk straight, one of them was probably tasked to drive, otherwise, all of them would have taken the highway to the afterlife. They picked the spot right across us, one table away from the truckers who eyed them suspiciously. At first, I thought they truly did intend to go to this diner, and we just assumed the worst of them. They didn't call us or try to take pictures of Dean or something stupid. Everything was going to be peaceful, it seemed. But it turned out I was wrong. From what I could gather, they were all engineering students on their way to the week-long Greaves Technology Fair in Las Vegas. They were taking advantage of the cancellation of classes at Alois University because of the Adumbry attacks, and also to escape the stifling state of our city with all the security and checkpoint stuff. Guys talking about giant robots and giant dicks. So typical. They could talk about whatever they wanted so long as they didn't bother us. I had attended the Greaves Fair at Vegas like 4 times if I wasn't mistaken. I accompanied Mom to that event whenever she had to give a speech in some forum or present new Greaves products. I wasn't a technology nerd, and I never understood Mom's explanation about the stuff there, but I still behaved like a very supportive daughter and showed fake interest. Augmentations were never my thing. However, I did know that Comexos weren't usually included at the fair, much less heavy military models. If there were any, they were displayed for their augmentation integrations. Our order arrived, and it unexpectedly looked good. Even Dean seemed to agree as her stressed face relaxed at the different kinds of food in front of us. "The waffles are great," I said. Normally, I hated small talk about food, but I really didn't have any topic in my pocket. And I wasn't lying about the taste. If only these EFU undergrad gits weren't here, these would have been a fun road trip. It really did bring back a lot of memories. Carefree days. Normal days. Was I becoming, what's the word, sentimental? I wasn't sure what that was supposed to feel like. Perhaps I was just missing the days I was a normal human and had normal human concerns. Or was that what being sentimental was about? "Yes, it's good," Dean agreed, cutting into the chicken with her knife. She placed the piece of meat on a slice of waffle and ate it. "Maybe we could return here someday to eat peacefully," she added, mirroring my thoughts. "How's your coffee without the honey?" I grinned at her. She rolled her eyes. "I can drink it black just fine." The family eating in the other booth had their food wrapped and left, the mother herding her kids away from the bad men. "Hey, kids. We're not bad," Goatee Guy called out, apparently overhearing her. But the family was already out the door. "I'm so ashamed of bothering these people," Dean said to me in a low voice that others wouldn't hear. "Bothering who?" "The customers. You're not doing anything here." Bothering is my middle name. This was my field of expertise, and Dean was incorrect with her interpretation of the law of bothering. "These jerks are the ones inconveniencing everyone here." "Yes, but if it wasn't for me. I mean, we know why they're here. If I didn't come, we shouldn't have gone here. We came here for our safety." I raked the skin of my arm with the fork and showed her the red marks. "They're harassing us, and now they're harassing others. It doesn't have anything to do with you. Because of me. It's not your fault, okay?" I felt some kind of déjà vu here. We have had this conversation in some shape several times already, but the roles were now reversed. "Maybe we should just leave." "Dean, do you want me to yell at you?" Time to pull out the real talk. You need to stand your ground here. And so what if you're super beautiful? I'm not. Yes, you are. And I was saying that just because you're beautiful, you can't be blamed for the actions of others. Like those creeps bothering the customers here. Was Helen of Troy blamed for the Trojan War? But she was, Dean said with a quizzical look. Remember the saying, the face that launched 1,000 ships to refer to Helen's beauty? She was blamed for the war. Not everyone did, but still. I needed to brush up on my Greek mythology. Those ancient Greeks were wrong to blame her then. From the corner of my eye, I noticed one of the asshole squad stood up the mayor's nephew. He looked extremely uncomfortable, clenched fists by his sides. Goatee Guy and Skull Tattoo Bro were forcing him to do something, pointing at our table. Were they ordering him to hit on Dean as some sort of hazing? What is it this time? I muttered as the messy-haired freshie hesitantly walked towards us. Hello? Said the mayor's nephew, timidly raising a hand as a greeting. His eyes, which were partially covered by his messy brown hair, darted in every direction, except ours. My name, I'm Eve. Eve, that's spelled with a Y. Hello, Dean curtly replied. She faced the other way, making it clear he wasn't welcome. "I'm Eve," he repeated. "What's your name?" She refused to answer, choosing to keenly examine the wall to her side filled with black and white photos from the diner's past. I followed Dean's lead and didn't reply either, poking my waffle with a fork. Not that I was the one being asked the question. I doubted if this Eve guy cared for my name. This did confirm these guys didn't recognize Dean. Undoubtedly, the amber Dean Leska was familiar to every guy going to Alois Field University, whether they be undergrad or grad students, every guy who cared about beautiful women anyway, which was most of them. However, Dean was always in her corporate attire for law school, with fall-on makeup and hair divinely styled. I already had a hard time recognizing her when she didn't wear any makeup and just donned casual clothes. How much more would guys who didn't have the expert skills required to see through women's makeover capabilities? "Go on," said another upperclassman. Eve upperclassman, not mine, whom I hadn't made a nickname for yet. I decided to go with Coconut Head because of his atrocious haircut that made him look like he had half a coconut husk as a hat. He continued egging on the timid kid. "Don't be shy. Ask for her number." I tilted my cup. It was half full, but it wasn't that hot anymore. Still good for splashing on people. Dean's cup of coffee was mostly untouched. How I dearly wished they bothered us some more so I could throw tea at them. That was a cliché move in drama movies. I didn't usually watch those, but I couldn't deny there was an oomph to it. Very dramatic. Eve scratched the side of his neck. Sorry for bothering you. If it's all right with you, can I? No, Dean shortly said. Eve flinched at that. He gave a panicked glance at the other guys, turned back to Dean, and tried his question again. Can I ask FO for your new number? No. We're eating here, I added in. I almost felt sorry for this kid. And yeah, he was a kid in my eyes. He was a first-year undergraduate student, so I was like an ancient dinosaur compared to him. I could tell he wasn't scared of Dean specifically, perhaps a little intimidated, but he was extremely uncomfortable with bothering her. He was really scared of the other guys though, that much was clear, which was why he was doing this despite not wanting to. "Oh, right," said Eve, stepping away. "Sorry about that." He returned to his friends, if they could be considered that, who laughed at him. They slapped his back and pushed him around a bit before allowing him to sit again. They shouted tips at him on how to get girls. Their advice had dubious applicability. The old lady tending the counter came over with a mop and told them to shut up. One of the truckers stood to help the grandma if trouble cropped up, but the jerk squad already quieted down. "I thought they already did away with pledging," Dean muttered. "Or are the first years already considered part of the fraternity, and this is just the usual bullying by more senior members?" "ACO did. They removed pledging. As far as I knew about fraternities, and I knew very little, applicants would start as a pledge, a probationary member, and they'd be accepted as a regular if they passed all the challenges. I was aware of the dark side of pledging, the hazing, drugs and alcohol-related incidents, all the bullshit dumb guys could come up with. There was an incident like 6 or 7 years ago, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it was all over the news that time about pledges forced to do Adumbri summoning rituals. Huh. Do those work? Okay, that probably isn't the right question. What kind of pledging system is that? Why not the usual nonsense hazing they do? Well, I don't think those rituals work. Likely, they're just urban legends. I have no idea why they chose to do that though. So what was that incident about? Rumors were that they actually summoned an Adumbri, said Dean. A pledge turned into one and killed everyone else in the room. The school covered it up, saying there was a gas explosion. This wasn't the Alois chapter of ACO frat, by the way. Videos of bid agents investigating the school circulated after that, so there was probably something connected to Adumbri that happened. Anyway, so that's why, last I've heard, ACO removed the pledging process. So, they're fraternity brothers now, right? I said, tilting my head at the screeching baboons. Dean nodded. Supposedly. But they're still treating him like that. During my first year in business school, I had a few classmates who were pledges to a fraternity. There was a drastic change in how they were treated by the fraternity they applied to as a pledge and as a member. What was the appropriate reaction here again? Oh, yeah. Poor kid, I finally managed to think, looking at Eve with his shoulders hunched, sitting at the edge of the bench. That was the emotion of pity, wasn't it? A nice approximation. I deserved a pat on the back. It was rare to find myself in these sorts of social settings. My curiosity was slowly taking over the intense annoyance that filled my head. Perhaps the great food helped to lift my mood too. So, let me get this straight. Pity for the bullied kid, check. Annoyance at the senior frat members, check. Or should I be annoyed at their group as a whole? Remembering Myra's reaction to the guys at Cindy's ogling Dean, I realized I had fallen short as a best friend. I should be popping these guys' heads off as soon as I got my Adumbry power back, and that was just a joke even though I wanted to do it. Dean wouldn't be on board with offing these bastards. It'd be funny if I managed to convince her though. I say I'd be doing her a favor, finally being able to fight back against those harassing her. What was the word? Cathartic? But then again, killing them was too much. Not just for Dean, but also rule number 4. Although if they keep this up, I just might find justification. The asshole brigade wasn't done with their antics yet. Skull Tattoo Bro sent over the other 2 first years, one by one, to try their luck with us. Or rather, to make fun of them while harassing us. Their names were Tahir and Lee, or something like that. I wasn't really paying attention because I was busy enjoying the apple pie. I did have to rake off the crust to eat it first. Both the crust and the apple filling were so great that I had thoughts of ordering a whole one for takeout. Not the time, errand. Unlike Eve, Tahir and Lee were more confident. They had the looks and charisma to pull it off, compared to the mayor's nephew. But Dean shot them down just the same, a veteran of shooting down probably dozens or even hundreds of guys. I don't know if there were any gals hitting on her. They all returned defeated to their table to the entertainment of their seniors. About a quarter of an hour had passed and things settled down. Or so we thought. Dean and I were right about finished with our meal, with most of the eating done by yours truly. It was also the time the truckers left the diner to resume doing trucker stuff. And with them gone, Skull Tattoo Bro and the Dick Troop were probably emboldened to resume bothering us. This time, it was Skull Tattoo, Bro Goatee Guy, and Coconut Head that came over, ready to show the freshies what they got. I placed the dinner knife on my lap and out of view. "Hey, girls," Coconut Head said, in between mouthfuls of his burger. "Where you headed to? Want us to accompany you?" Dean shook her head. She looked me in the eye to signal we shouldn't talk to them. "Come on, Blondie," said Goatee Guy. "Don't treat us like we're not here. How about you scoot over there, so I can sit beside you? You got a boyfriend, Blondie? Want one?" We got 3 eligible BABA. Goatee Guy puked something nasty on the floor. What was I saying? We're 3 bachelors. But you're not available. Coconut Head said to Skull Tattoo Bro. Don't you have a girlfriend? Knife and fork, I could probably remove some eyeballs even though I was a short and petite woman. The element of surprise would be on my side, and these guys wouldn't be in a condition to give chase. Stab, stab, pull Dean. And then go where? They might have slashed Dean's tires. But we could still drive away with busted tires. Or, we could run to the kitchen and lock ourselves in. The time for action was coming close. They weren't looking at me. I gripped a knife and a fork under the table. It'd be hard to pull Dean out and run because they were blocking the way. Maybe I could guilt the first years into stopping their seniors. Eve wasn't looking at us. Tahir was talking to him about something. Lee was filming us with a huge stupid grin on his face. Scratch that plan then. I'll just attack first and see how things. Hold it right there, young men, a sandpapery voice said. The old men chatting at the counter came to help us. Leave these nice ladies alone. Good, some distraction. A scuffle between the grandpas and the assholes would provide an opening for us to escape. But I still wanted to stab some eyes. We're just trying to have a good time here, Gramps, said Goatee Guy. Just return to a retirement home, will you? You disrespectful rascals. The old man's quivering finger pointed right at Goatee Guy's ratty face. Didn't your mothers teach you to be respectful to your elders? If you brats don't have anything else to do here, get out. Grandpa 1 said. Get out and don't bother these ladies. Grandpa 2 added, or we'll call the police. That's useless, I thought. Threatening to call the police wouldn't work to stop these guys. There was no police station nearby. Cops would be coming from outer space, taking ages to arrive, if there were any to send here. These assholes wouldn't cave to something like. Fine. Skull Tattoo Bro said. We're leaving. Happy now, Gramps? Excuse me. Just like that, they were giving up. They couldn't leave. I didn't have my dramatic moment yet. I didn't have any justification to stab them. And I did want to stab them for bothering us all the way here. I needed something for rule number 4. You heard the big man, Goatee Guy said to the freshies. Off your asses. We're going. Yeah, we don't want these old guys here to have a heart attack. No issues here, Gramps. Move along. Grandpa 1 gestured his gnarled hands towards the door. Glad you have some sense left in you. We're just getting to know Blondie here. Skull Tattoo Bro said, winking at Dean. See if she has a boyfriend. You didn't have to make a big deal out of it, Gramps. And then it clicked in my head. The perfect way to escalate the situation. She doesn't have a boyfriend, I blurted out. All of them, Dean, the Dick Squad, and the grandpas looked at me in surprise as if I had just popped into existence. She doesn't have a boyfriend, because she already has a girlfriend. And that's me. Huh. What Ash? Dean's eyes widened in shock. Then her forehead wrinkled in confusion. What are you? Love to be between that. Goatee Guy chimed in. The 3 dirtbags laughed their asses off. You damned brats disrespect your elderly, and women, you should how dare you raise your hands at me. Skull Tattoo Bro clenched his fist and was poised to punch Grandpa 1. I got enough of your shit, Gramps. Hey, what are you doing? Said Tahir. Lee tried to pacify Skull Tattoo Bro. We shouldn't do. It was at this moment the freshies realized things had gone too far. Kind of late already. Better late than never, I supposed. Once the shitstorm started, I was going to stab these bastards. A fork and a knife. That was 2 eyeballs at the least. Weirdly, I was extremely calm through all of these, enjoying myself a little. My experiences as an Adumbri really changed my perspective. I was a normal human right now, and very weak, but so long as I didn't die before the suppressor wore off, I was good. Get out of the way, Gramps. I swear Imma hit your wrinkled face. Stop. Stop. Dean exclaimed, raising her hands. Such a good person, worried about the elderly. She wanted to get out of the booth to get in between them, but Goatee Guy tried to grab her, so she retreated. Irene. Natalie. Grandpa 2 was probably calling out to the owner and her daughter. The man reading the newspaper had hurried out of the restaurant. Back off, you bastards. He swiped a fist at Goatee Guy, who stepped back and stumbled into Tahir and Lee. Knock down that old man. Stop that. Dean threw her coffee at them. Grayson, back off. A commanding voice boomed. Skull Tattoo Bro, who was apparently named Grayson, jolted in shock upon hearing the voice. He retreated away from the old men. All of us turned to the diner's entrance to gaze at the knight in shining armor who came to save the day. Action hero, that was what I decided to call him, was born to be on the poster of all action movies. He was more than 6 feet tall, muscles straining against his white Alpha Chi Omega shirt, a squared strong jaw and a typical stoic expression. I wouldn't be surprised if fans suddenly showed up to ask for his autograph. Or if explosions suddenly flared behind him. Enrico? I thought you were at the party. Hey, Enrico. Check out these girls. Dude, don't tell him that. Action hero marched forward. If this was a movie set, all lights would be on him. What do you think you're doing here, Grayson? I'm tired of covering up for you. He glared at the other ACO members. They cowered before him. And that goes for all of you. Don't stir up shit and stain ACO's name. How many times this has been already? He pointed at the door. For a moment, Skull Tattoo Bro looked as if he was going to start fighting again. But he lowered his fists and sullenly told his brothers, "Come on. Let's bail." Enrico, the action hero, stared at their backs before turning to us. He apologized to the old men and asked how they were. After making sure they weren't hurt, he faced Dean and me, bowing low. I sincerely apologized this happened. "Thank you for helping us," Dean said. She was still holding her cup. "You're a good young lad," Grandpa One said. "You tell your hard-headed friends to respect women and their elders." "I will. Again, I'm sorry for everything." And he strode off, the proverbial spotlight following him. Huh. That's it? What just happened there? In a couple of minutes, he smoothened out everything. And also derailed my stabby plans. I looked down at my arm and poked myself with the dinner knife. It slightly bent as I exerted force. My super strength and durable body were back. Action I meant Enrico, was it? I asked Dean. The guy who looks like an actor in an action movie. He's the grandson of the governor. A former governor, she corrected me. Melandro Haynes. I'm sure Enrico Haynes is his grandson. My father had contributed to his campaign nothing. Never mind. Anyway, Enrico's also an engineering student like those creepers, I guess for their family business in Comexo parts. So likely, he's a senior in their fraternity too, and that's why they listen to him. And I bet it didn't hurt that he has high social standing and political connections. There's a lot of important people around tonight, I said with a grin. Dean shrugged. Well, that's EFU for you. I heard from Adrian that Enrico is generally a great guy. Definitely not like his fraternity brothers. What do you think of him? Nothing, she simply said, raising a brow at me. I guess I'm grateful he stepped in to help us. And no, I don't think of him that way either, she added, noticing my teasing smirk. I have you, don't I? What do you? Oh, I get it. Because of what I said a while ago. Yeah, why did you tell them we were together? Dean whispered so that the old woman mopping the puddle of coffee near our table wouldn't overhear us. It just encouraged them to I'm not blaming you or anything, by the way. Was it because you thought they'd stop harassing us if I was in a relationship? Kinda. I scratched the back of my head while giving her an apologetic grin. I'm really sorry I made the situation worse. Now, I know what I did was wrong. My bad. Really sorry. Like I told you before, it's best to ignore guys like that. But they were already trying to. Are you alright, dearies? Granny had finished cleaning Dean's mess on the floor. Such a waste of a powerful dramatic move of throwing coffee and not hitting anyone. If only she left the dramatics to me. We're fine, ma'am, Dean respectfully replied. Thank you. Granny said, I'm so sorry you had a bad experience here. Natalie and I were checking supplies in the back. We shouldn't have left the front with those disrespectful rascals around. We assured her that it was no big deal, that we enjoyed our meal despite what happened, and that we'd certainly return someday to eat again for a nicer experience. Blah, blah, blah. She kept going that she would have whacked them with the mop if she was around. I would have paid to see that. I also would have paid for a chance at stabbing at least one of them. On second thought, my super strength was already returning and I might have ended up burying a dinner knife deep into their skulls. It might have been for the best that Enrico, the action hero that rhymed nicely, arrived to save the day. After Granny went away, Dean continued with her gossip about the ACO fraternity members. I'm not sure of this, but the man with the skull tattoo on his shoulder might have a record of sexually harassing some girl at a bar. Grayson, it's a familiar surname. It was covered up though, the last I've heard, that's why I don't know much about it. No, he wouldn't speak badly about his frat brothers like that. Just some gossip my radar picked up here and there. From what Enrico was saying, it seems to be true. Yep. Looks like it's not the first time he did something like this. And Enrico's the one cleaning up their mess, with his connections, no doubt. It appears that way, said Dean. I'm not sure if Enrico's still considered a generally good guy if he does that. Wow, am I standing on some moral high ground here? Of course, not. I was priming Dean for the future, testing how she viewed their situation. Checking her perspective, gauging her loyalty. I suppose not, she admitted. It was Adrian who said that though, not me. I don't condone what they did, assuming it's true. Dean's statement sparked a new idea in my head about how to test her loyalty. I slowly said, but I understand Enrico protecting his fellow member, their fraternity brothers. It's wrong, but I can see why he'd help that creep with the skull tattoo if he committed a crime. That's not a very nice view for a lawyer to have. Just another view. Prosecution or defense? Dean said, winking at me. It's not like I can judge them, I said, looking down glumly at the table, ignoring her law joke. I heaved a deep sigh. I'm also benefiting from your protection. Stroke Dean's ego, but also make her conflicted. I know you can turn me in. Errand, hush, she fiercely hissed in warning. Then she looked behind me. The old lady probably must have returned to the counter because Dean continued talking in a low voice, someone might overhear us. We don't talk about that in such an open place. It's just that I can't judge Enrico bailing out Grayson figuratively, or maybe literally, we don't know because I'm worse. I may. Don't say it, she muttered, glaring at me. You know what, and you're not worse. Just. You're protecting me. Aiding and abetting someone like me is, you know the penalties and how the law views this. Okay, you're not technically abetting me with anything, you're just not reporting me. And I'm grateful for that. I'll aid you, abet you, whatever term the law uses. I'll protect you, no matter what, okay? She met my eyes and gave me a reassuring nod. Enough of this. We've had this sort of conversation so many times already that I feel like we're a couple. She grinned at me, joking about what I said earlier. I rolled my eyes at her. Dean is interesting. Very interesting indeed. No hint of conflict in her demeanor at all. I expected her to have a wavering crisis if I brought up that she was breaking the law by helping me. She already knew that, but juxtaposing our situation with the case of the fraternity brothers might make her change her mind. It didn't, and that delighted me. Unless Dean was the best actress ever, I was now more certain of her resolve to help me. She didn't even try to justify that she was in the right doing this. We're not, but it felt like something she would do. Her moral compass was really weird. Or perhaps, this was just how normal people were. Even in the same situation, people would use a different moral standard if they were personally involved. And that's just with the same situation. I didn't know what crime Skull Tattoo Bro had committed, but if I polled the people in America, I'd bet they'd say being in a Dumbry was much, much worse. I think we can leave now, I said. Now? Said Dean. I haven't heard their loud truck drive away yet. Exactly, I thought. I wasn't done testing Dean just yet. And I wanted to teach those bastards a lesson, not sure what. But they should learn about something. Perhaps I could antagonize them some more so they'd tail us again, or not if Action Hero would stop my plans again. Antagonize? No, that was the wrong term to use and went against rule number 4. The Jackass Squad already had the predisposition to bother us. I was very much included in that us. What I was allowed to do was present them with an opportunity, using the words of legal sting operations, to make the biggest mistake of their lives. Dean craned her neck to the left, out of our booth, looking at the front part of the diner. From the lights through the windows, I think they're still there. And shadows are moving about. People are by the entrance. We can just leave. I held a fork at both ends and easily bent it like those fake psychic tricks famous on TV when I was a kid. Have your powers returned? I asked as I straightened the fork back to its original shape. Dean looked at her fist. I think so. Then we have nothing to be afraid of. But. No buts, I interjected. We couldn't do anything earlier because we were powerless to fight back. Just 2 girls versus 6 guys. Now, we can beat them up if we want to. Yes. I was helpless. Dean shook her head. But that doesn't mean I want to hurt them now. I don't want to stoop to their level. I almost asked, why not? Wouldn't a normal person want to bash the ugly mugs of those bastards after what they did? I supposed, yes. Or no. This was sort of untested waters for me. I didn't know if I was losing my touch predicting how people's minds worked, or if it was just that Dean's morality was all over the place. It might just be me. Or it could be that the setting had changed, we were the way more powerful side now. My thinking did change knowing I could squish their moronic asses. But to be fair, Aaron, the best friend of Dean, wouldn't suggest something so audacious and brutal as beating up people, even if they were perverted creeps. That Enrico guy should be out there, I said. It should be safe. For them, I added in my head. Dean closed her eyes and breathed deeply. When she opened her eyes, she had a calmer expression. Okay, let's go. We were able to peacefully return to Dean's car, which was a pretty big disappointment. She was right, the bastards were waiting for us outside the front door. But they didn't do anything other than bullshit catcalling. By the end of the parking area in front of the diner, 2 people were talking beside a sports car. With the flickering lights of the diner sign above them, I saw that it was Action Hero and Skull Tattoo Bro. I tried to get a rise out of the bastards by looking at them in the eye. I knew that tough guys, or those pretending to be one, would easily get offended by it. Still, they didn't do anything. It was just Goatee Guy and Coconut Head yelling obscene shit about me and Dean being girlfriends. The 3 freshies were sitting in the back of their truck discussing something. I couldn't do anything drastic that'd provoke them because it would be against my face. Boring, I thought as we drove away. For about 15 minutes, we drove peacefully through the desert. Dean and I didn't talk with each other, savoring the unpolluted air blowing through the open car windows. Slow hip-hop music played and I was slowly falling asleep. But before I could completely close my eyes, I saw something. I sat straight up and turned down the music. What is it? Dean asked. Really? Dean asked, her voice now more annoyed than worried compared to when the suppressor was still in effect. Power truly did change how people acted in a given situation. I thought everything was already sorted out. Apparently not. It's just their noisy truck. No other cars. Enrico wasn't with them earlier, probably arriving in another car. Then they ditched him to chase after us, Dean grumbled. I've had plenty of guys chase me over the years, but not as literally as this. Wow, you're joking now. I'm glad you're feeling fine. Gabe isn't telling me anything, so there's no need to worry. And, you're right back at the diner. If they try something funny, we can always beat them up. I bet her guardian angel was silent because it was aware of my plans. How was it going to react knowing what I was going to do next? Would her guardian angel risk a confrontation with me? Not only would Dean lose to me in an actual fight despite having a stupid future-seeing pet, but she also would probably not listen to her pet at all. It was in her guardian angel's best interest, which was to protect her, not to get in my way. I gave Dean a sidelong glance, specifically staring at the space above her shoulder. Then I examined her face. She didn't look anxious anymore, just mildly annoyed. While I was somewhat certain of Dean's guardian angel's actions, I had no idea how she, herself, would react to what I planned to do. Time to find out. Okay, what did a person whose mind was plagued by a Dumbry look like? Imagine someone was annoying inside my head. Spooky Errand was there, but she was chill most of the time. I pictured other Adumbry whispering temptations, messing with their hosts' minds, those sort of stuff. Anger, hatred, perhaps something like the primal instincts of Blanchette. Recall the time I first transformed into Blanchette, I could barely control myself. And when I got hurt, anger and hunger followed. The feral rage. Dean, I said in a strained voice, forcefully gnashing my teeth so loud that she'd hear it. I feel. Errand. She turned to me and leaned closer. Are you okay? What do you feel? Oh my God, your hands are shaking. She leaned closer to me, the car zigzagged a bit. I clenched my fists tighter until there was a faint snap. What's that? She asked, noticing the dark liquid trickling from the side of my hands down to my legs. Errand, open your hands. I did, revealing deep wounds on my palm. I had dug my nails into my skin. Did it look like I was having a hard time controlling myself? Dean, I'm hungry. That was lame, but it was the only thing I could think of, trying to emulate losing my mind as Blanchette. Oh my God, Dean said repeatedly. She drove with one hand on the steering wheel, barely looking at the fortunately empty road ahead, as she opened the glove compartment and rummaged for something to wipe the bloodstains on my hands and legs. The wounds were already healing. What's wrong, Errand? She pulled out a few crumpled pieces of paper and dabbed them on the drying blood. What's going on? I'm feeling hungry, the Adumbry inside me. Hungry? It must be so much anger at those creeps harassing us. The Adumbry is trying to take hold of me. I'm sorry, Dean, you should just leave. No. Gabe isn't telling me anything. Nothing bad is going to happen to. He might be silent because everything would be fine if you just left me. Just drop me off. No way I'm going to do that. I'm not going to leave you. Just for a bit, leave me alone just for a bit. I'd say I was doing a good job pretending to struggle to speak. I was rocking back and forth in my seat, tensing my arms. I curled my fingers, threatening to close my fists again. Dean held my left hand as she tried to steady the car. The bastards following us probably noticed something weird was going on. I said, come back later. Just leave me. Later, return, I'll have control of myself again. If I leave you, then those ACO frat boys will go to you. I don't think they'll continue following me if they see you all alone by the side of the street. Exactly. I whispered. The perfect opportunity. I wouldn't even do anything and they'd shrug off the protection of rule number 4 on their own. Exactly. She slowly repeated. My plan dawned on her. You said that you're hungry. What are you going to do to them? It's better if you don't know, I mumbled, my words barely understandable as I gritted my teeth. I held the sides of my head as if I had a massive headache. Drop me off, Dean. This is for your own good. Now, what are you going to do? With this, I'd be taking back control of our group of 2 without her realizing it. Plus, I was really interested in what the asshole platoon would do if they saw me on my own. I'm not going to leave you. Drop me off or I'll open this door and jump out on my own. Don't you understand what I'm trying? I know. She loudly interjected. And I'm saying I'll be with you if you do that. That gave me pause. Did she misunderstand what I was implying? Should I clarify what I meant by hungry? Look. She pointed at something in the distance. That looks like an abandoned gas station over there. It's better if we lead them there so that we're out of sight from the road. Eve Garland opened and closed his clammy hands to stop them from getting numb. They tingled, the blood rushing away from his fingertips due to the stress and anxiety. The cool desert air drying his sweat made him more uncomfortable, and a bit nauseous too. It was weird he was sweating when he wasn't doing anything. He was only sitting at the back of Grayson's pickup truck, hugging his knees to make himself as small as possible so Miles dancing like an idiot wouldn't accidentally snag him. Barely moving so they wouldn't notice him. If they weren't thinking of him, they wouldn't make fun of or force him to do anything moronic. I'm not doing anything here. Nothing at all. Just following along with whatever Grayson and the others told him to do. It was their fault if anything bad happened. His fellow first-year and longtime friend, Tahir, had assured him several times this was normal because they were new members. Hunker down and ride it out, his best friend constantly told him whenever he noticeably wavered during their application process. Pledging was only gone on paper, everyone knew that. As long as they were freshmen, they were considered lower-class fraternity members even if they were already called brothers. That was just it. Think of the benefits later on, was another thing Tahir repeatedly mentioned, and the connections. Benefits of being a criminal. Eve wanted to yell at his best friend earlier while they argued about what to do when Grayson and the others were about to fight the old men trying to stop them from harassing the ladies at the diner. Should they have held back their fraternity brothers? Obviously, yes. The 3 of them agreed on that. But no one wanted to do it. The confident and well-built Tahir wouldn't dare to lift a finger against their seniors, concerned about his future standing in the Brotherhood. Lee, who was very close with Miles and Bridger, didn't want to try convincing them to stop, fearing that they'd think he was lame and weak. As for Eve, what was he supposed to do if Tahir and Lee didn't want to move? I'm such a coward if only I'm like Tahir. No, he was also scared to do anything. Eve closed his eyes as he remembered the scenes during the incident at the diner. If Enrico didn't arrive at the diner on time, who knew what these guys would have done to the old men? To those 2 ladies? Eve knew the answer to that. He knew what could have happened because he had heard of the rumors about Grayson's past, rumors that were likely true as Lee had told them. Miles and Bridger weren't saints either when it comes to women. Their 3 seniors would clobber the old men and probably force themselves on the women. And they'd call on Eve and the 2 other first years to join them. What would I do if that happened? Likely nothing. Probably just follow orders. What about now? Eve tried to stop himself from vomiting as Tahir drove Grayson's truck off the road, heading to what appeared to be an abandoned gas station with a convenience store on the side. The blue car the 2 ladies drove was parked in front of the rotting store. He couldn't understand why they went here. Didn't they notice that they were being followed? Eve feared what Grayson and the others would do to them in this isolated place. I should stop them this time. His rapidly beating heart already told him he wasn't going to follow that thought. This was supposed to be an uneventful drive to Las Vegas for the Greaves Technology Fair. 4 hours ago they were all hanging out in their frat house at EFU campus, having a small party with their affiliated sorority. Their sisters were leaving because it was already late, but Grayson complained loudly that he was bored. Bridger, his right-hand man, with the signature goatee twirl he did whenever he came up with what he thought was a great idea, suggested they all go to the fair since they didn't have any classes for the week. An impromptu road trip, an exciting and safe idea that Eve thought he might actually enjoy something with his new brothers. Furthermore, he was excited to visit the tech fair. Every year he'd always go there with his parents on the weekends. But with the Adumbree incident, they scrapped all their plans until the situation calmed down. He was supposed to stay in his rented apartment near the campus while his classes were cancelled. His parents made him promise that. They didn't know he was staying at the ACO fraternity house, they didn't even know he joined a frat. And they also didn't know he had left La Esperanza and was on his way to Las Vegas. Grayson's group decided to leave at that moment, hoping there was less traffic at the checkpoint and also wanting to enjoy driving through the desert in the dark. Enrico thought that was a good idea and said he'd follow them too. He was just waiting for another one of their brothers to arrive. And it was good luck that Enrico did catch up to them. Actually, it was incredible luck that he knew where they were. Did someone text Enrico? The thought crossed Eve's mind. That was the only explanation. Enrico would stop at a random diner. He couldn't have spotted Grayson's truck if he was just cruising along the road. And when he entered the place, it was as if he already knew that Grayson was about to do something stupid again. Was it Tahir? Or Lee? Why didn't I think of trying to contact Enrico? Eve stared at his cell phone screen. The upper right portion showed there were no bars. They were so far out in the middle of nowhere that no signal could reach them. With that option gone, he prayed that Enrico was racing after them at this moment. While they were gathered outside Mr. Beefy's diner, Enrico told Grayson could probably even consider it strictly ordered to wait for him while he went back inside. Bridger explained to them first years that Enrico was going to check if there were any CCTV cameras. He'd also order food and leave an enormous tip, and maybe also try to pay off the two grandpas as an apology. Not only was it to smooth things over, but Enrico's main goal was to take names and details in case the police were going to be involved later on. It seemed to Eve that this wasn't the first time this happened. Lee's stories about Grayson's past became more of the truth rather than rumors. Enrico should be really angry right now, Eve thought. He should be looking for them after they ditched him when he entered the diner. But would he notice them here at this gas station a bit of a way off from the side of the road? Probably not. What if I just walked away, he whispered to himself. What did you say? Miles said, combing back his bowl cut that Lee always trash-talked behind his back. Nothing, Eve muttered. If he did walk away, where would he go? He could walk back to the diner and then call some of his friends for an extremely huge favor to pick him up. That was better than being here with these guys and getting entangled in something illegal. He really didn't want to know what these guys would do to those two girls. Thoughts of helping them barely had a space in his mind as he didn't even dare to help himself. They reached the gas station. Tahir parked the truck on the other side of the pumps and not near the girl's car. Eve would like to think that his best friend had some sanity left in him and did it so the girls would notice their approach, giving them a chance to hide. He still couldn't understand why they went here. Maybe they thought they'd find some help here like at the diner. But it was obvious this whole dump had nobody around. If there was a time to say no and leave the group, this was it. As he jumped off the right side of the truck and his feet touched the gravel-strewn ground, he knew in his heart that there was no way he could simply walk out on them. Should I just keep the truck running? Tahir asked. How would you know? That time with the whores at Brother Joe's bachelor's party? Why are you looking at my ass? Oomph. Miles tripped over something, probably a rock, and tumbled to the ground. Arg, blasted crap. Lights. Enough of that ass talk and lights, phones, phone lights. Everyone except Eve laughed at Miles spitting out dirt as Lee helped him stand up. Then they all turned on the flashlights of their phones to see where they were at. Creepy-ass place if you ask me, Bridger said, stroking the long goatee that he was proud of. The gasoline station looked like it hadn't been used for more than 50 years. Only a few patches of dirty paint were all that were left covering the pumps and the roof overhead. Even the graffiti sprayed on the pumps was peeling off. Rust covered most of the metal sheets on the roof, reminding Eve of dried blood in this dim light. "No one asked you," Grayson snapped. "Now, where did Blondie and her twig of a friend go?" A loud creak that echoed through the night over the loud noise of the truck's engine made them all look at the store. With Grayson leading the way, they all trooped to it, stopping for a few seconds to make sure no one was inside the girl's parked car. "This place gives me the nasty vibes. It's just an old crappy building." "Shut up both of you." As they stepped inside, they found 4 empty shelves running the length of the store. One of them had fallen on its side. There was dust and cobwebs everywhere. The windows had been boarded up by planks of wood. All of them entered. Grayson shined the light of his phone towards the end of the store. Someone stood there. The girl with the slightly wavy long black hair was petite, but Eve wouldn't call her a twig. From her pale youthful face, he guessed she was probably near his age. She simply stood still with her hands at her sides, defiantly glaring as if daring them to approach her. There was another creak and the door behind them closed. Eve, who was at the back of their group, gasped and turned around. "Good idea closing the door," Miles said. "But I didn't. Nice to have privacy, man." Bridger rubbed his hands together. "Where's Blondie?" Grayson demanded. The girl didn't say anything but only shrugged. "Is she offering you up to us? Throwing you to the wolves? Or you want to have some fun with us?" The 3 seniors laughed. Tahir and Lee looked at each other. Lee had a half-hearted grin on his face and nudged his head toward the girl, sort of saying they should play along. Tahir turned around. Meeting Eve's eyes, he mouthed, "What should we do?" Eve shook his head. He didn't even know what he meant by that. "Sure, we can have fun with you first," Miles said. "But Blondie has to join in later." "You gals are together, right?" Bridger said. "Did Blondie want you to have a taste of men? That's why you're here? Doesn't she want to see what'll happen to you?" "Yeah, why isn't Blondie here?" mumbled Grayson. "How about the 2 of you give us a show and—" "You imagining shit now?" Miles said with a tinge of nervousness in his voice. Unlike Bridger, he stepped back and also looked around the room. "Set up? Like other people are hiding here?" The rest of them looked at each other, unsure of what was going through Grayson's mind. Eve slowly moved back to the door, carefully shuffling his feet so they wouldn't hear him. "What do you mean, Gray?" Bridger said. "They got cameras here. You're overthinking shit, man. They just want a good time and—" Eve noticed the black-haired girl raise her brow at Grayson's statement. He might be imagining it, but she seemed to slightly sneer at them. But why would she have that expression, unless Grayson was correct that they were really setting them up? "I can't get caught by the police here," was his first instinct. What would his mom say? She'd be devastated. He shouldn't have come here. "I don't think that," Miles began to say. Grayson cut in, "Lee, you go check her." "Check for what? Why me?" "Don't ask questions. Just go. She might have wires on her or a small camera." Grayson pointed at Eve. "You. Check this place if there are hidden cams." Eve didn't know how to do that, but he complied, going for the windows to see if he could leave through that way. If he went out the door, they'd notice and most likely stop him. But if he could find an unbarred window or at least loose planks he could remove, he could escape while the store shelves blocked him from the view of the others. He kept his ears peeled. "Yeah, go on, Lee. Don't be shy. She won't bite you." "What if she will?" Miles laughed out loud. "What if she's like an Adumbry? Go check if she's an Adumbry too." Guys? How do I that? Cut her." "What?" Eve stopped trying to pry off the wooden planks covering a window when he heard a girl's voice speak. It was Twig Girl. But he wasn't able to hear what she exactly said because of the loud laughter. They did quiet down after hearing her talk. "I'm asking what is the thought process here," she said. Her voice was surprisingly gentle and soft that it made Eve guilty he was leaving her alone with them. "You're from EFU, right?" she continued. "You should be smarter than this." "Smarter than? Hey, how did you know we're from EFU? This is really a setup. You're Aubrey's friends." "I don't know who that is." "I know you're from EFU because of your frat shirt. And I also know you're dumb. You're going to check if I'm an Adumbry. And then what if I am? What if I am an Adumbry? Do you guys have a backup plan?" "Well, no. I wasn't going to tell you that if you didn't ask. Are you an Adumbry?" This time, it was Tahir's voice. Eve couldn't make out her answer because Grayson and the others laughing and jeering at Tahir. Did she say yes? What were the chances of meeting an actual Adumbry? But then again, why did these girls lead them here? They might be like those stories of beautiful women enticing men only to transform into monsters to eat them. As bats hit crazy as it sounded in his head, the explanation that they were an Adumbry would fit into everything here. "Nah, that sounds stupid. Please let this be a comedy prank show," Eve whispered as he successfully removed one wooden plank. He stared outside in the darkness that the high beams of the truck by the pumps couldn't pierce. "Where are the cameras? Don't tell me that she's telling the..." Lee's blood-curdling scream filled the decrepit store. "Arg! My hand!" There was a thud as an object hit the ceiling above Eve. He fell on his butt as he tried to avoid it falling. He scrambled for his phone and pointed the light on the floor. It was a severed hand. Charles Grayson, usually called by his surname because he had a senior fraternity brother also named Charles, abruptly stopped laughing as Lee's screams reverberated in the air. He and his brothers all looked at each other. What was that about the hand? There was a thud somewhere behind them to their left. Twig Girl had her hand raised, it was coated with some sort of dark liquid. She had thrown something away. A pathetic yelp to their backs told Grayson that the weak punk Eve found out whatever it was. Another thud. This time, it was Lee falling to his knees. His screams made Grayson's headache worse. Then Lee turned to them, holding his arm. It ended in a bloody stump. Grayson's brain finally processed that the Twig Girl had literal blood on her hands. Lee was about to drop to the floor, already curling in a fetal position from the pain, but Twig Girl grabbed his hair with her bloodied hand and kept him upright. He feebly struggled to break free but didn't seem to completely understand what was happening to him, more focused on his chopped hand. It was the turn of Bridger and Miles to scream like little girls as they processed what had happened to Lee. Tahir called his friend's name and ran past Grayson to help him. But Grayson reached out to stop the stupid first year, accidentally dropping his phone to the ground as he yanked back Tahir's shirt. "Lee!" Tahir cried out. "Grayson, let go. I need to help." "Adumbry?" "But Lee." Golden light suddenly filled the room. It came from some sort of bullshit floating above Twig Girl's hand. She still tightly grabbed onto Lee's hair with her other hand, raising him off the floor. Her captive seemed to have regained a semblance of thought as he struggled to escape, trying to pull his head away. As Lee begged for his life, he punched and kicked her. But it was just like he was hitting a concrete post. Twig Girl didn't budge an inch. But that also meant she wouldn't instantly kill them. "I'm going to use the others as bait to survive." Bridger fell on his ass while continuing to scream. He just laid there on the ground, paralyzed by fear. Then he just started bawling like a baby instead of trying to flee. "Adu Adumbry. Help!" Miles turned and ran, but he tripped over Bridger's legs in the dim light and slammed headfirst into the side of a store shelf. He fell back to the floor beside Bridger. They no longer had any cell phone lights. The only illumination came from the mysterious floating blob next to the Adumbry. Its golden color was turning red as it took on a more solid form. "Miles!" Bridger. Tahir finally managed to break free of Grayson's grasp and run to their other fraternity brothers. "Dumbass," Grayson said, shaking his hurt hand. He was about to turn and leave them, but he was surprised that half his heart told him to help. He pointed his gun at the Adumbri. Blowing off her head might stop her. That was if he could land a hit, a tall order given his state. Shooting any other part of the body wouldn't do shit, he knew that much. His hand continued trembling. Blam! Blam! Flashes of light brightened the store, showing just how much blood Lee was losing from his severed hand. Twig Girl's face bathed in red was strangely calm despite getting shot at, almost as if she didn't care about any of them. But she moved Lee's slowly weakening body in front of her, shaking it as if daring him to shoot again. Should I? He might hit Lee, or he might hit Jack's hit because he couldn't see straight. I'm going to save my bullets. There was scrambling and shouting as Tahir helped a limping Miles to get away. Bridger wouldn't go with them, tightly hugging a store shelf and literally crying for his mom. I'm not going to die here. Grayson ran to the entrance of the store. You forgot your friend, the calm voice of Twig Girl could barely be heard over their raucous escaping. Arg! He exclaimed as something heavy hit him, knocking him against a wooden column. It was a whimpering Lee. The first year squirmed while groaning in pain, barely conscious. The overpowering metallic smell of so much blood climbed up Grayson's nose. The sticky liquid was all over his arms. He could feel bitter vomit rising up the back of his throat, but he swallowed it down. Rage and despair filled his heart. Piece of shit, he spat out as he kicked the useless sack of potatoes that was Lee off of him. Grayson. Lee. It was Tahir. His voice came from the other side of the store. Where are you? The door was only a few feet away. Grayson hurriedly continued on all fours towards it. The red light disappeared. Everything went black. He didn't know what happened and he didn't want to know. There was an ominous striking sound as if metal hitting metal. A guttural growl followed, filling his heart with dread. Help! Bridger shrieked. Bridger! Leave him! Grayson turned the doorknob and pulled. The door moved only about an inch. There was a rattling noise and he couldn't open it more. Complete darkness greeted him through the gap. Wasn't his truck's lights supposed to be on? He tucked his gun back into his pants and pulled at the door with both hands. There was that clinking noise again, sounding like chains. Did someone close it outside? It must be Blondie. Her friend was in a Adumbri and she was going to feed them to her. They must have done this plenty of times, probably prowling this empty stretch of the desert road for victims. Mommy! Mommy! Burke! Is Bridger dead? Where were the others? Grayson couldn't hear them, only Lee who was still moaning several feet behind him. His hands grew cold as he realized that they were the ones who left him. Those limp-dicked bastards. And to think he tried to fight the Adumbri for them. He had done so much for them and this was how they repay him. That scrawny Miles and those two ungrateful first years. How did they escape this store? Grayson could feel a breeze. He should follow it, just like finding the way out of a cave. Drafts can also lead deeper into the cave, he remembered his brother's words when he joined his group exploring the Carlin tunnels. But there was no deeper part of a store and so he resumed crawling. Bridger had quieted down. Probably dead, that poor bastard. It was only Lee making noises now. Grayson prayed that none of the old floorboards beneath him would creak. Where was the Adumbri? Footsteps. It was somewhere to the shelves to his back. She was going to where he was several seconds ago. Was she following him? No, she was walking to Lee. Grayson. Lee feebly called out, his voice clear in the silent store. Grayson, where are you? Shut up, you dumbass. The dick couldn't just die on his own. Then a small gust of wind washed over Grayson's face, making him also cry out in relief. It was hard to see, but one of the windows had its boarding removed. He could faintly make out the sky outside with a few dots of stars, not much else. The others went out this way. Arg! It hurts! Shouted Lee. Good! That would cover the sounds of his escape. He quickly climbed through the opening. His sleeve snagged a protruding shard of wood. He forcefully pulled it, making more noise than he intended. But what was important was that. I'm free, he celebrated as he rolled to the ground outside. Lee's pitiful pleas for help filtered out the window. That meant the Adumbry was still busy torturing him. He had a bit of time. Didn't Tahir leave the truck running with its lights on? Whoever locked them in the store tampered with his pickup truck. I'm not alone here, he concluded as he pulled out his gun again. Lee's screams faded away as he presumably died. After Lee, Grayson knew that he was next. Miles, Tahir, and Eve had abandoned him. Wait. Did those guys take the truck? His heart pounded even faster at the thought of being left alone. They couldn't have. He would have heard the engine. And they left the store barely a minute before he did. At the least, he should see them driving away, right? Even in the dark, he rushed in the direction of where he thought the truck was going to be. That stupid Tahir parked it so far away. Something hard, probably a rock, caught the tip of his front foot. He lost his balance and fell to the rough ground. The skin of his face and arms stung. He ignored the pain as he felt around the dark for his gun. As his hand closed on the textured surface of the gun's handle grip, he let out the biggest sigh he ever had. Picking himself up, he continued on. Am I going the right way? Then he broke into a huge grin as an idea popped into his head. I'm a genius, he shouted with relief. He raised the gun and shot it in the air a couple of times. From the flashes of light, he noticed he was about 20 meters left of the gas station. Thankfully, he wasn't running off into the desert. He also noticed Blondie's blue car by the store. A few more shots to light his way. He was so near his truck. Yes. He triumphantly yelled as his hand touched the cold exterior of the door. He felt for the handle and then pulled it open. Jumping inside the driver's side, he paused for a second. Aren't I forgetting something? The keys. Of course, the keys. He searched for it below the steering wheel. It wasn't there. No. 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 He scrambled looking for it, feeling for it on the dashboard, the passenger seat, on the floor. He exited the truck and started feeling for it on the ground. Should he shoot again? Then he remembered the important thought at the back of his mind. Someone turned off the lights and the engine. It should be Blondie. Light shone on him. Tahir? He said as he turned to his left. No, answered a female voice. Blondie. She was approaching him with a shovel over her shoulder. Grayson momentarily paused as the gears in his brain ground to a halt from her beauty and figure. She has the keys, you dumbass. His mental outburst shocked him into action. He raised his gun, hesitating only for a second, and shot. At this range, he shouldn't miss. And his hands weren't shaking anymore. But Blondie had raised the head of the shovel to block the bullet going for her face. Wow, she said with a chuckle. This is amazing. The bullet blocking thing, not what's about to happen to you. Blondie's fingers dug into the sides of his head, punching through his skin and flesh down to his skull. She was incredibly strong and he was losing consciousness from his head slowly getting crushed. She was an Adumbry. Both Blondie and Twig Girl were Adumbry all along. They must have planned to eat them from the start. Don't let go. Don't let go. He chanted repeatedly. Arif. No. His fingers strained to hold on. Blondie had already pulled his head and upper body out through the window. Maintaining a death grip on his head, she grabbed his left arm and yanked it off the steering wheel. There was a crack and a pop. Insane pain traveled up his arm to his neck. Because of it, he also let go of the headrest and he was thrown out of the car. Shit. He cradled his trembling injured left arm. There was light again. Blondie had turned on her phone and was now picking up the shovel. Can I fight? No. She was in a dungaree. Half of her shirt was bloody from the bullet wounds he caused earlier, but she didn't seem to mind it. He picked himself up and tried to run. Wham! I don't want any of this to be personal, Blondie said, standing over him with her phone's flashlight. Grayson wanted to respond but couldn't. Pain overcome him. He hugged his injured hand and rolled on his side to vomit. His face hurt like hell when he puked. It was like he was dunked into a vat of acid. He could feel the flaps of his shredded flesh wiggling because of the cool desert wind. Blood snaked down to the ground, gathering into a pool beneath his face. His legs wouldn't follow his thoughts. You're a perverted harasser and you should be in jail, she continued. But that doesn't mean I have the right to torture you or even kill you. Perhaps others might think so, but I don't. It's not justified. Am I going to die here? Grayson tried to speak, ignoring the searing pain in his facial muscles. Please. Whatever wrongs you have done in your life, and I'm sure there are many, including to me and Aaron, I'm not the one who should judge and punish you for them. Don't, please, don't. Another wave of puke came out of his mouth. And I know that what I'm doing here is wrong, she said. She wasn't listening to him but more like talking to herself. It was as if she couldn't hear him. So, that's why I allowed myself to be hit by your bullets. Granted, that's not much to me, but it's some form of penance for what it's worth. He forced himself to turn over. I need to get away. He dragged himself across the ground with his hands. His legs could barely move. Pain radiated up to his abdomen. Still, he clawed his way forward. But I have to feed my best friend, she said, slowly walking beside him as he squirmed across the desert like a lost slug. I have to protect her, no matter what. That's my promise to her. I failed her before, and I can't fail her again. I can't fail. Period. Live, he said as he pulled himself onward with his right hand. Live. His left couldn't grab anything so he used his elbow. Live. I think she's hunting your friends over the small hills there, said Blondie. I'm going to tie you somewhere she can see you, then I'm going to leave you. I shouldn't be around when she comes. I don't think she wants me to see her eating. That's going to be awkward. Don't let me die, please. He inhaled through his clenched teeth and braced himself for the pain, yelling with all his might. I don't want to die. I'm sorry, Blondie said. He felt something grip his ankles. He was getting pulled up. I'm really sorry, but Aaron comes first. This is for Aaron, Amber Dean Leska whispered through clenched teeth. I'm not going to fail her this time. I don't fail. Despite herself, she pressed her ear to the store's door, hoping to get a clue of what was happening. She wasn't exactly telling the truth when she told Aaron that she had full confidence in her. Male voices were talking and laughing on the other side, but she couldn't make out what they were saying. After they had alighted her car several minutes ago, Aaron told her that she was going inside the store alone. Naturally, Dean didn't agree even if she was aware her best friend was incredibly powerful and wouldn't have any problems even if there were 1,000 of these jerks. She didn't want to let Aaron out of her sight. She was her responsibility. However, Aaron told her she didn't want that side of her to be seen. Dean knew what her best friend meant. She was confident she could stomach witnessing whatever was going to happen. However, she realized it might affect their relationship. Not on her part. But Aaron would certainly be ashamed of herself, and Dean didn't want her best friend to be uncomfortable. Maybe it was for the best if she distanced herself in this situation. And so she went around the back of the store and returned to the front after hearing all of the creeps had already entered. I hope everything is okay inside, Dean thought as she heard shouting, not yet screams of terror. She tightened the rusty chain she coiled around the door knob of the store and tied it to one of the wooden posts holding up the portico above the entrance. Giving it a test tug, she confirmed it was secure. That should stop them from escaping, so Aaron could eat them all inside the store. It was going to be much cleaner that way. The only remaining problem was their pickup truck. Dean looked to her left. The vehicle was parked on the other side of the gasoline station. Its lights were on and it was noticeable from the road. The truck was alone following them. So where were Enrico and his red sports car? Did these guys leave their senior fraternity brother at the diner? Given what happened there, Dean supposed Enrico would not be too happy they went off on their own. He might be looking for them right at this moment, driving in this direction. She grabbed the shovel leaning against the door. This old thing was with the chain she found inside a small storage cabin behind the store. She didn't know how it'd help, perhaps to bury any leftover bodies. But she brought it along just the same. How about burying the vehicle? Would it be too far-fetched to dig a hole in the ground deep enough to bury the evidence? I can do it, she thought. With her super strength, it was possible. But it would take too much time. Better hide the truck behind the store, away from the view of the road, and leave it at that. Dean pressed her ear against the door again. She wanted to turn the truck's lights off, but she was concerned about leaving Aaron. Someone inside the store screamed. A blood-curdling scream. Unlike the muffled talking voices from earlier, she heard what it was. Aaron seemed to have bitten someone's hand. Dean tightly shut her eyes as if that would silence the world. She didn't want to cover her ears with her hands because that was disrespectful to the people who were going to die. The guys may not be exactly good people, but they were innocent and didn't deserve this kind of end. And yet, she wasn't doing anything to stop Aaron. The truck. Tightly gripping the shovel's rough and rotting handle, Dean walked briskly to the pickup truck. Running away from the store, running away from the screams. At the least, she could prevent Enrico or anyone else from being drawn to this location. I can save someone, that should count for something. Darkness swallowed everything after she turned off the truck's light. Sunrise was still an hour or so away. The only thing she could clearly see was Gabe, a feathery white ball floating over her shoulder. Although Gabe was visible, it didn't illuminate anything around her. She pocketed the keys and stared back at the store, wondering what to do next. She should just wait here, right? How long until Aaron would be done eating? Gunfire. Two pops echoed in the deathly silence of the desert. Oh my gosh. She grabbed her shovel. They had guns. Aaron might get hurt. With her cell phone lighting the way, she started marching to the store. Stay. The surprise of her guardian angel talking again after hours of silence made her stop. The instruction itself? She was going to disobey that. A bullet to the brain could kill an Adumbri. She had to check on Aaron. I would stay away from the store if I were you. Why? Dean asked, giving Gabe a sidelong glance. Expectedly, there was no answer. But she relented and followed its instructions. She stood in the middle of the gas station. Now what? No more shots followed. She breathed a sigh of relief. Aaron must be okay, or else there'd be more gunfire. Dean would be surprised if only two were enough to stop her best friend. She had survived a grenade explosion right in front of her. Huh? What's that? Dean tensed up as she spotted light at the side of the store. She turned off her cell phone's light and hid behind a gas pump, observing the situation. Someone had thrown out their cell phone through the window. From what she could make of the shadows, it seemed that a person was trying to climb out. Dean had done a quick lap around the store before chaining the door and see the windows were all boarded up. Which was why she thought securing only the door was enough. Some of the boards must have been loose or rotting away. It was no surprise considering how old this place was. I'm so careless. In total, 3 people exited the window. Dean's first thought was to worry about Erin's safety. Could they have done something to her? No. There were 6 of them. Erin must be busy with the other 3, and these guys took that opportunity to escape. What should she do about them? Of course, she wasn't going to let them escape alive. These guys knew their faces. It would be easy to trace hers and Erin's identities all the way to the bid checkpoint at La Esperanza where they first met. A dreadful thought crept into Dean's mind: should I just kill them myself? The awful gnawing pain around her left shoulder blade had returned. It was more a psychologically induced pain than anything else. If it was physical, her abnormal regeneration should take care of it. And she was indeed stressed with the problem in front of her. She had killed before. But those were men sent by the 2M to kill her, so she was only acting in self-defense in that situation. This was different. Different. How? She yelled inside her head. How is this any different? She asked the gas pump beside her. Not exactly self-defense, but it was also for self-preservation. There was no way she should let them go. Let them go. She raised her brow. Did those 3 guys have guns? Was her guardian angel saving her from getting shot? It could also be keeping her away from Erin, who was eventually going to come out of the store. Dean took a deep breath and relaxed. Thinking logically, chasing them in the desert would be next to impossible in this darkness, especially if they split themselves up. The best choice was to guard the truck because some of them might return to it. She was then going to restrain anyone she caught for Erin to eat. I can't believe I'm feeding in a Dunbury. Dean vigorously shook her head. No. I'm helping a friend, a very precious person to me. Erin was the first best friend she had, a true friend. Someone who didn't care about her appearance, her family, social connections, and all those things external to her. Erin was relying on her, not as Amber Dean Leska, but as her own person, and Dean wasn't going to fail her. Dean knew Myra had helped Erin satisfy her urges, as evidenced by the bloodied clothes she found in the washer. Who was Myra in all of this anyway? She only did that because she wanted Erin's help in finding her sister, a selfish reason. In contrast, Dean was doing this for the sake of her friend. That's right. I'm the worst if I'd abandon my friend here. Noises snapped her out of her thoughts. There were no lights, and she didn't dare use her cell phone to not give away her position. She crouched down, taking care not to make any sound, and squinted at the darkness. There seemed to be a dark form lurking by the store. Erin? One of the guys. Footsteps hit the ground hard and headed somewhere to her far left. Somebody was there. It was too heavy to be Erin unless she had transformed into Blanchette. Hide on the other side. Other side of what? Dean just assumed Gabe meant the gas pump, so she transferred her position. Whoever was running was getting further away into the desert. Dean wanted to follow the sounds to check if it was Blanchette. Part of her wanted to meet the Dunbury side of Erin again. How in control was Erin if she was in her Blanchette body? Would Dean be able to talk to the Dunbury? It might just be wishful thinking, but she wanted to try to convince it to leave Erin alone. Could she offer her own body to save? Blam! Blam! Oh my! Dean bit her tongue as she covered her head with her hands. Gunfire? It wasn't Erin. Who was this guy shooting at? Now, he was running towards her from the sounds of it. Move to the back of the pump. She did as she was told. A few more gunshots disturbed the peace of the desert. Is he using his gun as a light? That person headed to the truck. Dean poked her head out the side of the pump, just in time to see him shooting up in the air again. From a brief second that the gun's flash fought back the darkness, she saw that the person was the man called Grayson. She couldn't mistake him with his skull tattoo for anyone else. She was surprised that Aaron let him go. Shouldn't she be angriest at him the most? Maybe her best friend couldn't control her hunger to direct it to a specific person. Yes, yelled Grayson. He must have reached the car. Dean looked over her shoulder, back at the store. She heard wood getting torn apart followed by a low growl. It was unmistakable even if faint. Something not human came out the window by the left side where the other guys had exited. She couldn't see that part now because she had changed positions, but she was certain it was Aaron, she excitedly whispered, pushing down the urge to call out loud. And by the sounds of it, she did transform into Blanchette. Should she find another hiding spot? Dean intently peered at the corner of the store, trying to see if a shadow was going to show up. Even if it was mostly the Adumbry in control, Blanchette should remember about her, shouldn't she? No, I'm going to keep my promise, she mumbled to herself. It was up to Aaron if she wanted Dean to interact with her Blanchette transformation. Furthermore, if Blanchette lost control of herself in her feeding frenzy, Dean didn't want to be around. Instead, she should get Grayson and put him somewhere visible so Blanchette wouldn't miss him. It would make Dean feel so much better if it was Blanchette who killed him rather than herself or Aaron in her normal body. Dean went to the pickup truck. With her cell phone's light, she found Grayson digging the dirt right outside the driver's side of the truck. He must be looking for his keys. Tahir, he said, facing Dean. He blinked his eyes to adjust to the light. No, she replied. Use shovel to cover your face. Grayson fired his gun at her. Dean felt a tingle race from her hand up her arm as she steadied the shovel shaking from the bullet's impact. More bullets came, but Gabe was ready to tell Dean which way to lean and how to angle her shovel to avoid or block them. Wow, this is amazing. She chuckled at what just happened. The bullet blocking thing, not what's about to happen to you, she clarified to Grayson. The desperation in Grayson's voice got to Dean. One step left. Raise shovel to your right shoulder. No, Dean let the next few shots hit. There was a searing pain in her shoulder joint. A bullet must have lodged in between her bones. Parts of her arms stung. The oozing blood warmed her skin from the cold desert winds. I'll need to change my clothes later. Grayson jumped back inside the pickup truck and slammed the door shut. Was he going to escape out the other door? Without any hesitation, Dean punched the driver's side window. Her fist went through it like it was paper. She grabbed the front of Grayson's head and tried to drag him out of the car. He held on inside the car and pulled away from her hold. She slowly closed her grasp so that he couldn't escape. Her fingers pierced skin and flesh, and soon her nails were scraping his skull. Don't think about it. This was like the time she was punching the men sent by the 2MS to capture her. She should ignore the sensation of human flesh and bone. The memories of cracking skulls under her knuckles made her sharply breathe. I don't want to remember that. In frustration, Dean reached with her other hand into the truck to pull Grayson's hand holding onto the steering wheel. Some use of super strength and some broken bones later, and she finally got him out. Dean bent down to pick up her shovel and phone. When she turned back to him, he had stood up and was trying to run. Extremely irritated that he wasn't following her plans, she chased him and whacked his legs with the shovel. I don't want any of this to be personal, Dean explained to him. Grayson vomited on the ground while groaning and rolling in pain. From the smell, he must have peed himself. She tasted bile at the back of her throat. Swallowing hard and breathing evenly, she pushed down the urge to puke. Perhaps, she should have just killed him and spared him this suffering which she was causing. No. No. She already decided to help Aaron. And she was going to see this to its end. You're a perverted harasser and you should be in jail, she lectured him. But that doesn't mean I have the right to torture you or even kill you. Perhaps others might think so, but I don't. It's not justified. She continued talking. To him? To herself? Probably the latter. Dean went on about how she wasn't supposed to be the judge of Grayson's actions in life, much less punish them for it. Even though Grayson wouldn't care, if he was even listening to her, Dean told him that she wasn't going to fail errand again. I'm sorry, she eventually said as she seized his ankles and pulled him. Her words rung hollow. But what could she say to a man she was bringing to slaughter? She tried to remember all the harassment he did to her and Aaron to make herself angry. It just didn't work, her heart still felt heavy in her chest. She was feeding him to an Adumbry that Adumbry was her best friend. But still. I'm really sorry, but Aaron comes first, was all she could say in the end. Her shoulder pain returned. She ended up tying his legs to a wooden post by the store's entrance with the chains she earlier used to lock its front door. Don't scream so you'll live longer, she said. He quieted down, probably accepting his fate. Did her words sound too threatening? She was honestly trying to be helpful, but it came off as something morbid. Turn lights off. Dean complied, tensing up at the possible danger. Was Aaron coming? Help. Help. Grayson suddenly screamed. I'm here. He. Surprised at the outburst, she instinctively swung the shovel at his face. He crumpled in a heap. Oh my God, she said as she knelt beside him. Are you still alive? His body fell limp as she tried to pull him into an upright position. Even if she wanted to check if she killed him, she didn't want to turn on her cell phone's lights. She looked around to check what her guardian angel was warning her about. Are those headlights? A car had veered off the main road and headed towards the gas station. As it approached, Dean noticed its red color. She still couldn't clearly make out its form, but its lights were positioned very low. A sports car and other similar models had low ground clearance. How many sports cars drove through this stretch of the desert at this time of the day? It meant only one thing. It was Enrico and perhaps other ACO fraternity members. How did they know to come here? Dean said as she slinked away into the darkness. She didn't bother to hide Grayson's unconscious maybe dead body because they could see the truck anyway. There was blood there if they'd investigate. Her guardian angel also didn't tell her to do anything about it. Gabe did guide her on how to avoid being seen. Two men alighted the car, one from the passenger's side and one from the back, and rushed to the pickup truck. Sure enough, they found traces of struggle, specifically the broken window and the blood. Mostly my blood, Dean thought from behind a gas pump. The two rushed to the store. Dean wanted to stay and check their reaction when they found Grayson because it might give her a clue if she really killed him. But she had a more important thing to do. And it's better if I didn't know, she added in her head. Dean sprinted to the cover of the truck, careful not to get seen by the light from the sports car. That was her target. She should prevent their escape. The driver should still be there and it was up to her to incapacitate him. Looking behind her, she saw Enrico and his friend run in the direction where their fraternity brothers had fled earlier. They must have seen or heard something that made them go there. This meant that they didn't know there was an Adumbry here. Aaron chose this place because there was barely any signal here. So how did they find us? Did they decide to randomly check this abandoned gas station and saw the pickup truck? I'm just going to ask the driver of the sports car. An engine revved, followed by the sounds of tires crunching gravel. The car is going to leave. Dean's eyes widened at her guardian angel giving her information instead of an order. Are you going to let me decide what to do? She whispered as she rounded the back of the truck. You could have told me about it much earlier. She would have preferred actual instructions in this situation. She surmised that the car was driving back somewhere with a cell phone signal to be able to call the police. She couldn't allow that. Help me. She hysterically screamed as she popped into the car's view. She waved her hands and jumped up and down to make sure she was seen. Help! Help me, please! A girl with bloodied clothes asking for help. The driver was bound to help her. The car didn't stop. It continued reversing back to the main road. In fact, it was gradually picking up speed. What the? She rushed to get the shovel she left beside the truck and then sprinted towards the car. Am I going to make it? Throw shovel. Gabe rattled off instructions on how to do it with a perfect form. Yeah. Dean yelled as they launched the shovel. It pierced through the air, giving off a slight whistling side, and penetrated the passenger's side of the car as it righted itself on the road. The shovel entered the window and most likely hit the driver. This time, the car stopped. Oh my God, she said with each exhale. Her arms tingled from the adrenaline rushing through her body. Gabe, what was that supposed to be? She snapped at the feathery orb floating over her shoulder. It was silent. Was it trying to teach her how important it was to listen to its instructions? I'm not going to let this one pass, Gabe, she said as she marched to the car. She was trying to be angry, but couldn't. A huge smile was on her face. This car could have called for help if not for her. What would Erin do without me? Dean was going to tell Erin about this later so she'd recognize how important it was that they were together. Her best friend had to understand that she could rely on her. Just like when Erin woke up after the grenade explosion, Dean was immediately there for her. It didn't matter that it was Dean who threw the grenade. I was so excited to try out this new face that I had goosebumps all over while waiting for the asshole crew to enter this abandoned store. My enthusiasm for the drama that had ensued deflated a bit when the bastards basically trash-talked me saying I was a twig and couldn't get a guy. True, I was extremely petite and short, but elementary was the last time someone called me a twig or some similar insult. I did put on a bit of muscle in high school when I became a cheerleader. And excuse me, I can get a guy if I wanted. That was my favorite hobby during high school, destroying relationships of girls who crossed me. Sometimes it panned out, sometimes it particularly failed. My heroic Blanchette face didn't really find much success, with only Reginus and her loony followers believing I was a good Adumbry. But then again, it was a tough pill to swallow for an average person that an Adumbry was trying to save people. So, how about an Adumbry killing people? The Alois University first-year student who dared to touch me had the surprise of his life when I ripped his hand off. I was also surprised by how easily I tore it that I almost yelped and ruined the theatrical moment. I only wanted to break his arm, intending to draw out the moment and slowly build up their terror. But it worked out anyway because their pathetic screams followed. How amusing it was to see how fast these creeps changed, from supposedly being in control of the situation, bullying a lone girl, to absolute crybabies. I summoned Blanchette's mask. I didn't want to dirty my own hands, and I certainly wouldn't try to eat them with my own body. If I could get them to attack me as Blanchette, then that'd be great. Leaving behind half-eaten bodies for Dean to find later would also cement the image I wasn't in control of my Adumbry side. I'd have plenty of excuses to do bad stuff in the future. What irritated me further was that he kept trying to get away, kicking me and punching me, even using the bloody stump of his arm. I have to change my clothes later. He also kept on begging that I let him go, which was understandable. But he didn't have to yell it at me. I was just right next to him. To my delight, skull tattoo bro, I assumed that was him because it was hard to tell in the dim light, fired a gun, probably at me. I figured guys like these would have weapons. He didn't hit me though. I didn't even notice him pull out a gun because I was busy enjoying the panicked reactions of his fraternity brothers. If he was lucky, he could have landed the headshot of his lifetime, and also my lifetime because I could have died. I wiggled his friend's body at him, daring him to shoot again. I could have already worn my Blanchette mask to reduce the risk of dying, but it was fun to gamble every once in a while. And I bet a normal-looking frail girl waving a bloodied body like a ragdoll looked terrifying. Maybe I should have brought Dean along to record everything. Skull Tattoo Bro didn't want to risk shooting his friend. I'm not going to die here, he yelled as he ran away. The others also fled. You forgot your friend. I called out, throwing their first-year brother amongst the shelves. I couldn't see it, but it sounded like I scored a hit. Oh, they left you here. I used the glowing Blanchette mask floating over my right hand as a light to illuminate the trembling body in front of me. It was Goatee Guy curled up on the floor, hugging the bottom of a store shelf with all his might. He was horribly sobbing, with tears, snot, and saliva pooling into a puddle around his head. He kept on repeating "mommy" or something like that as he tightly shut his eyes. I wasn't sure if he realized I was beside him. This guy was such a letdown. I thought they'd put up more of a fight to make this whole thing enjoyable. A horror movie wasn't fun if the characters just rolled over and waited for their turn to be killed by the monster. The audience would walk out of the theater if that was the case. I hoped Goatee Guy's frat brothers would be more proactive. From the very heavy traffic going out of La Esperanza when I expected there to be fewer cars, to my tea-splashing plan that didn't come to fruition. I already had plenty of disappointments for the day and didn't want to add any to the list. I'll just kill this guy and move on to better prey, I thought as I brought Blanchette's mask to my face. And the mask becomes a face. It was like someone turned on the lights in the store, although the actual lights probably no longer worked. My Blanchette eyes could easily see in the dark. All my other senses were also heightened. From the noises and the smells, I could tell how many people were inside the store with me. One was heading to the front door. 3 were escaping through a window, the cool but dry desert air flooding in. As for Goatee Guy in front of me, I sniffed the air a couple of times to check. Did he pee himself? Yo! This was not a good time to have a super sense of smell. Of course, it wasn't disgusting to me as Blanchette, I had eaten far more revolted things. It was the thought that sickened me. In my annoyance, I stabbed Goatee Guy with my straightened fingers. Help! He yelled out as my claws pierced his chest. His blood sprayed me. There was a moment of clarity in his eyes when everything probably returned to him and he remembered what was going on. He tried to scream again, but I closed my hand, crushing his ribs and sternum, shredding his lungs and heart. Bridger! Leave him! It was the voices of the guys by the window. By the sound of it, they were already outside. I could clearly hear their footsteps as they run away. They might just provide the dramatic moments I was looking for. For a couple of seconds, Goatee Guy surprisingly still managed to feebly struggle. He tried to pull his body away from my claws, but I had hooked them inside his body. His efforts to speak failed, with copious amounts of blood pouring out of his mouth as his lips moved. He violently coughed to clear his thought and cried, "Mommy! Mommy! Brink!" Then his whole body fell limp with his last breath. With my other hand, I grabbed his head, not to close his eyes but to crush his skull. If Dean would decide to check their bodies later, I wanted her to be horrified by the carnage she'd see. I quickly dismantled his body like I was shredding chicken to mix with salad. Then I left Goatee Guy's mangled body, which looked like a kid had played with his spaghetti meal, and moved on to my next victim. The one-handed freshie was still somehow conscious despite the blood loss from his severed hand. His skin was already turning pale, although not as pale as my original body's complexion yet. He'd eventually beat my naturally pale skin if I just left him alone to bleed out. He had managed to prop himself up against a store shelf. He intermittently groaned in pain while nodding his head as if he was sleepy. Skull Tattoo Bro was crawling to the windows where the others had escaped through. His nervous breathing was very loud. I was going to leave him for later. Grayson, the one-handed freshie, weakly spoke. He looked up at me even though he shouldn't be able to see my form in this darkness. Grayson, where are you? Grayson? Oh, yeah, that's Skull Tattoo Bro's name. Since this kid was mostly only following his senior fraternity brothers, I decided to give him a quick death. He had suffered enough, and there was nothing for my evil Blanchetta Dumbry face to terrorize here. What was the most efficient way to do it? Break his neck. I held his head with both my hands, wondering how the people in martial arts movies do it, and swiftly twisted it to the side. Arg! It hurts! He shouted. Bones cracked, but I obviously did something wrong because he was still alive. Next, I bent his head back, hoping that would do the trick. It didn't. He cried out more. I could have continued bending his head until he died. However, that wasn't what I was aiming for. How do they do it in the movies? I tried different ways, moving his head around like it was a stick shift for the record. I hated manual transmission, careful not to accidentally kill him with brute strength. It reminded me of experiments as a kid removing the legs of beetles to check if they could still walk. I'm free! Someone outside yelled. Skull Tattoo Guy had apparently escaped the store. That snapped me out of my focused fascination with human anatomy experimentation. Oh, that's right. I was supposed to give this kid a quick death. I snapped his head around until his face turned straight back. Too bad for this guy that he wasn't an owl. This was what I should have done right from the start. Then I also proceeded to tear him apart while thinking about what to do about the bodies. Put them inside the store and burn it all down. What about their truck? We could also burn that. The problem was that such a fire could be seen from the road. It would only take one passing car who'd care enough to phone the police about a mysterious fire. Or we could just leave them all here and do nothing. What was that? Dean. With narrowed eyes and gritted teeth, I rushed to a window and tore away the wooden planks blocking my path. The distinct sweet scent of Dean's soap or perfume, I still hadn't asked her what this product was noticeable in the breeze. I couldn't detect any new smell of blood other than what I had on me. I had smelled Dean's blood before, I even drank it. If she was wounded, I'd surely notice it. She must be fine. The wind blew through the hills behind the store and down to me, carrying traces of the smell of the three who escaped. Skull Tattoo Bro wasn't with them. He must have gone for the truck instead. I leave that to you, Dean. She wouldn't let us get caught, would she? I dropped on all fours and ran, sniffing the ground as I followed the tracks of a three. There was someone with a brain among the three of them because they eventually split up as they continued running. Well, two of them did. One was hiding behind a weird rock formation. His breathing was faint, I could tell he was trying very hard not to make a sound. Unfortunately for him, his pounding heartbeat gave him away. And also his smell. I must be imagining it, but I think I could smell fear. It was hard to describe. I stood up and walked around the pile of boulders, making noises with each footstep to add to his dread. He didn't move. I looked around but still couldn't see him. This was something straight out of a movie that the main character would do to kill a monster. Good job. But not good enough. Gworg. I roared as I hurled the rock back to the top of the stack of boulders. Main character guy yelled in surprise, not expecting me to throw it back at him. Sliding down the side of the boulder formation, he avoided getting squished. He tumbled to the ground, picked himself up, then ran. The noticeable limp told me that his fall hurt him bad. There was a flicker of light as he seemed to have turned on his cell phone for a second and then turned it off. He must have realized that I could simply follow the light. He was doing all the things the main character should do to survive a horror movie. Too bad I couldn't let him go. I could see him bright as day as he blindly ran, his hands stretched out in front of him. I should have let that rock hit me, I thought in annoyance at myself. The chance was already there. I didn't take it. If I got hurt by the falling rock, even a teensy-weensy bit, my ability would have activated and I could chomp main character guy without vomiting my guts out. Stupid errand. Since the moment had already been ruined, might as well quickly dispatch these 3 lost rats, dismember them, and then kill Skull Tattoo Bro to finish off the night, or day. I'm going to ask Dean about this night-day thing later. I sprinted at main character guy who was still floundering in the dark and swiped my claws at his neck. I wasn't able to completely lop his head off, it hung on by a few strings of muscle and a stretch of skin, but I had severed his spine. I grabbed his hair as he fell and kicked away his body to completely separate his head. There, a quick death, I thought as I threw his head at his crumpled body. He deserved that much for being the main character of my horror movie. I wouldn't be surprised if it was his plan that they all split up. And then he stayed behind to try to kill me while his friends fled. Such a swell guy. But where are the other 2? I managed to pick up their scent again, but I couldn't hear them nearby. There were also marks on the ground showing where they had run. I followed their tracks around a small hill when I realized that they must have circled it and headed to the abandoned gasoline station, to their truck. I ran on all 4s for more speed and cut over the hill while looking for them. As I made my way back to the station, their smells greeted my nose. I also spotted their tracks on the ground. Soon enough, I spotted their forms running with all their might. I growled to let them know of my presence. Tahir. Tahir. Did he? Mother Core, help ah. The taller guy pushed his friend to the ground and left him behind. I suppose that was the extent of their brotherhood. I briefly glanced at the kid who fell, recognizing him as the freshie whom the others had bullied into hitting on Dean, and continued to chase the one who betrayed him. This is also in horror movies, and it makes me really happy there's drama. I stood back on 2 feet and leisurely walked around him while snarling. His imagination coupled with the darkness would do the rest. If he could see what I actually looked like, he probably wouldn't be as scared. Bent over, with his hands covering his head, he looked like a snail that was terribly trembling. Please don't kill me, he continued. I'll do whatever you want. I'll worship Adumbri. I snapped my jaws at the air. There was a waft of a couple more new scents. Hard soles of shoes hit the ground. 2 people were running towards us. Bridger. Eve. Shouted a familiar voice. Tahir. Where are you guys? Called out another, someone I hadn't heard before. Enrico. Cried out Coconut Head. I'm here. I kicked his head and he fell silent. So we got action hero now too. This was shaping up to be a complete horror movie experience. Was that Miles' voice? Enrico Haynes whispered to his best friend and fraternity brother, Charles Mond. He immediately switched off his light and elbowed Charles to signal him to do the same. YR. Shoo. Keep it down, Enrico hissed as he crouched to hide behind the slope of the hill. He pointed his gun further up the hill, fruitlessly trying to spot if someone was coming down in the near total darkness. Okay, man. Chill. Charles matched the low volume of his voice and also bent down. Shouldn't we go looking for Miles? That was his voice, right? Yeah, and he got cut off. Someone else is out there. Shit, really? Charles took out his gun from inside his jacket. The someone who tied Grayson to a post. Before they rushed to these sandy hills because of the screams they heard, they had found Grayson, also known in their fraternity as the second Charles, unconscious and chained to a wooden post by the abandoned store. Grayson's face was covered with blood from his severely broken and almost flattened nose. Enrico would like to think that he felt Grayson's breath on his cheek as he checked him, but he wasn't too sure. From the angle of his legs, they seemed to be fractured. Maybe his arm as well. He must have been tortured moments before they arrived because the blood was still fresh. And what's the connection of those girls to all of this? Enrico was certain that the blue car parked near the store was driven by the 2 girls he saw at the diner. Tahir did text him that Grayson had the idiotic idea to continue chasing after them. He couldn't contact Grayson or Tahir afterward because of the weak signal in this area. Actually, he was incredibly lucky that they decided to check this abandoned gas station instead of continuing down the road trying to catch up to a truck that wasn't there. One of his guesses was that the girls had friends who came to help them. For them to leave Grayson in that state, that dumbass probably did something really bad. Maybe someone's, Enrico said to Charles. A single person can't have done this. He crawled on the ground with his knees and elbows, taking care to make as little sound as possible. Fortunately, the hill was mostly sand with random shrubbery he could use to hide. The fine grains barely made any noise as he moved. Come, let's try to find where our brothers are. Find? We can't even see squat, Charles derisively whispered. But he still followed Enrico. Then these bastards, whoever they are, also can't see us. Man, this is dangerous as hell, Charles muttered as he crawled faster to be beside Enrico. I think we should just wait for the police, he tried to persuade him. Corey should have contacted them by now. Maybe. After they saw the broken window of Grayson's truck and the traces of blood, Enrico immediately told Corey to drive somewhere with a signal so he could call the police for help. And how long will it take them to come here? Enrico shot back. We're in the middle of nowhere at an ungodly hour. Yeah. Enrico didn't care much about Grayson. In fact, he thought Grayson deserved a good beating. But he was his brother, and the brotherhood came first. He didn't want the police to arrive before he could take care of these cowards who tortured his brothers. A few years ago, when Enrico was still a new member, a rival fraternity jumped on his brothers as they came out of their favorite club. He was supposed to pick up the drunk seniors' expected duties of a first year and saw the whole thing happen while he was waiting in the parking area. He hid behind his car and didn't do anything to help them. What could he do? He didn't even have a gun or know how to do any sort of first aid to help his brothers after their attackers left. All he did was call the cops and waited. As years passed, he realized he could have done so much more back then rather than just twiddle his thumbs. Now, he was resolved to uphold the brotherhood no matter what. He believed something similar was happening right now. Someone had a beef with his brothers and jumped on them. But this time, it shouldn't be a rival organization. They had mostly been at peace with everybody he could think of for the last year or so. No, this was somebody else. This wasn't a fraternity issue. But it is now. If these guys who attacked Grayson and the rest weren't friends of the girls they harassed, Enrico could think of other possibilities. It wouldn't surprise him if this was related to other women Grayson had harassed in the past. For his own conscience, Enrico had decided to stick with this term even though his brother had done a wide array of acts beyond harassment. Perhaps an angry father who rounded his friends together to get revenge for his daughter? Or could they be Aubrey's brothers? Those guys did try to attack them in court when they had the case dismissed using their connections. Enrico wasn't proud of covering for Grayson. But he was certain his brother would do the same for him. Of course, the difference was that Enrico wasn't doing anything that needed covering other than his covering for others. In the end, they were fraternity brothers, and they were brothers to the end. So, what's the plan here? Charles softly said. Get behind them, Enrico said. And shut up. These mysterious assholes had certainly heard them and knew they were somewhere nearby. Both groups were in the dark. Both groups were armed. Enrico thought it was prudent to assume that these guys also had guns. It was an even fight. Everything was quiet. If only Miles or their other brothers could make another sound so Enrico would know where to go. Were they all unconscious? Were they dead? Maybe he should crawl forward, and he tensed up. There were faint noises of shifting sand. Someone was approaching. Hear that? Whispered Charles. Quiet. That someone was getting closer. Very light footsteps. This person was shuffling his feet. He helped me, called a weak girl's voice. Please help, anyone. Her feet, not his. And she sounded hurt, which explained the weird way she walked. Charles lurched up, but Enrico pulled him down and also stopped him from turning on his phone. Wait, he told Charles. This must be one of the girls from the diner. Was she trying to trap them for her friends? Or was she a victim herself and used as bait to draw them out? In either case, he decided it was better to wait and see, or rather listen for more clues. As long as there was no light and they didn't make noise, their enemies wouldn't be able to find them. Suddenly, Charles pulled away from his grasp. Hey! Enrico whispered in surprise. This idiot. Then there was light. Charles had turned on his phone. Enrico quickly crawled away so he wouldn't be seen. He clenched his teeth in annoyance as he surveyed their surroundings. He was ready to shoot anyone who'd attack Charles. If he also revealed himself, they'd both be caught in this potential trap. Help me please, the girl weakly said as Charles approached her. She was short, thin, and had black hair. Enrico was sure he'd seen her at the diner. She must be the friend of the stunningly gorgeous blonde woman Grayson was trying to hit on. Her clothes had tears and were bloodied. She also had blood on her arms and face, a victim used to bait them out. And Charles stupidly fell for the bait. Show yourselves, you bastards, Enrico hissed under his breath. He laid flat on the ground, his hand tightly gripping the handle of his gun. Charles approached the girl. Enrico tensed, expecting an ambush. But nothing happened. Charles said, Miss. Are you hurt? Enrico shook his head. Charles and his stupid questions. I am, yes. Ugh, they hurt, was what she probably replied. Enrico couldn't clearly hear. Charles tried to get the girl's arm to put around his shoulder, but she violently flinched and pushed him away, probably in pain. She fell to the ground. Charles rushed to her aid and kneeled beside her. Enrico. She's hurt, man, he shouted as he helped her up. Adumbri. Someone shouted. Enrico jerked in surprise. That was definitely Eve's voice, even if he had heard the timid first-year talk only a handful of times. And what was he warning them about? He craned his neck, looking for Eve. He was tempted to use his phone, but he stopped. Did Eve say Adumbri? What the hell? It was a warning that Enrico would have scoffed at a month ago, but after what had happened in La Esperanza, including his own experience narrowly escaping some of the mushroom monsters a few days ago, he didn't immediately dismiss it. She's an Adumbri. Eve yelled again. Enrico wasn't mistaken about what he heard. Run! Huh! Eve! Charles shouted in the darkness. Eve! Come here. We're here to irk. A sickening crunching sound followed. The light dimmed as Charles probably dropped his phone and it pointed away from them. Enrico turned to his friend with his gun and phone raised. Adrenaline rushed through his veins, his finger over the trigger. He was met with a gruesome sight. Charles was facing Enrico, his blank eyes reflecting the phone's light. But his whole body faced the other direction. The black-haired girl stood beside Charles, holding his head with both her hands. The rest of Charles's body hung limply from his head in an almost kneeling position because the girl was much shorter than he was. She shook his head like it was a magic 8-ball. His ragdoll body swept the sand. Then she turned his head left and right like she was using a steering wheel, seemingly experimenting with something while muttering to herself words Enrico couldn't hear. She still hadn't looked in Enrico's direction, focused on whatever she was doing with Charles's dead body. Charles's lifeless eyes continued to stare into the empty desert. The most logical thing to do was to run. However, rage filled Enrico's heart and clouded his judgment. Charles wasn't only his fraternity brother, he was a close friend even before they joined the fraternity. I'm going to kill you. The usually calm and collected Enrico shouted with all the anger bursting inside him. The girl no, the Adumbri finally looked at him. Die. He fired his gun. Tahir. Enrico. Dead. Everyone is dead. Eve Garland thought that despite hearing Enrico's angry cursing echo through the dark desert punctuated by gunshots, he counted the only senior brother who was actually nice to him in the fraternity as a goner. There was no way he'd survive the Adumbry. Should have I not warned them? What if he didn't yell that Twig girl was an Adumbry? Would they have lived? Probably only for a little longer. The Adumbry was going to kill them all. There were no more screams. Eve ran faster back to the store, back to the gasoline station. Still no signal. His voice cracked as he checked his phone. He sporadically turned on his phone's light to make sure his path was clear. If he left it on, the Adumbry would easily find him. Tears ran down the side of his eyes, and he felt like he was about to puke from desperation and anxiety. Just keep running. Everyone was dead. Lee, Bridger, and Grayson, those three they left behind at the old store. There was nothing he could do to save them. Even Grayson with his gun wasn't able to do anything. Eve had heard Tahir scream, the Adumbry found his best friend. And he had seen Miles die. Charles, and now Enrico. Everyone was dead. And he was next. No. Not everyone. There was still someone else alive beside him. Earlier, after Eve had climbed out of the store, he was faced with two decisions: run back to the pickup truck or flee to the hills behind the store. The truck was the no-brainer answer. Except that its lights were turned off. Someone had gotten to it, probably the blonde friend of Twig Girl. He didn't know if she was an Adumbry worshipper or an Adumbry herself, but meeting her wouldn't do him any good. The pickup truck was a trap. And so, he chose the hills. Tahir and Miles, who were also able to escape the store, followed him. "Please, Mother Core," Eve prayed as he ran. "Please, I pray that I made the right choice." It was a split-second decision while he was on top of the hill looking down at Charles and the Adumbry. Running deeper into the desert seemed like the best choice for survival. But Eve didn't immediately follow his instincts. The Adumbry had managed to find them once, even in the total darkness. She would certainly find him again. However, going back to the gasoline station sounded like a worse idea. And Eve wasn't even considering it until he spotted something from his vantage point atop the hill. He caught a glimpse of light from the gasoline station. It wasn't from Grayson's truck. It wasn't from the car that the Adumbry girls drove either. The headlights were from Enrico's sports car. And the light was moving. Someone was driving. Eve recalled that Corey and Charles were riding with Enrico to the fair. Since Charles and Enrico were dead, Corey must be the one driving it. He only had to get to the car first before Blondie would show up, and then they could quickly escape. In his haste descending the hills. In the darkness, Eve tumbled twice. And twice he quickly stood up, not minding his aching body. He flickered his phone to check where he was. He had returned to the back of the store. His dead fraternity brothers were inside. No. Don't think about that. The urge to vomit returned as his mind was filled with images of dismembered corpses. There was a hint of blood in the air. Run! Run! It was faint, but from the corner of the store, he could see the beams of the headlights. That was his ticket out of here. He turned the corner and saw Grayson. His senior brother was lying by the entrance of the store. Grayson's face was covered with blood, chains coiled around his legs. Eve paused for a second, shook his head, and then rushed to Enrico's car. He was unwilling to waste one more second looking at someone he couldn't help. If he didn't leave this place soon, his fate was going to be the same as theirs. The red sports car stopped beside the pickup truck. Eve frantically waved his hand holding his lit phone as he crossed the gas station, almost running into a rusty pump. Did Corey see him? Where was Blondie? Help! Help! He shouted. Corey! He couldn't make out who was in the driver's seat. Something was coating the windshield, or was that his imagination? He swallowed hard as he neared the car. Something was wrong. He shone his phone's light on the windshield. Ah! Eve tumbled back in surprise and fell to the ground. Blood! Blood had splattered the windshield from the inside of the car. Corey was dead. How was the car still moving? "Hello," said a female voice as if to answer the question in his mind. Eve's heart, beating hard like it would burst out of his chest, abruptly ground to a stop. There was a tingling sensation as his blood drained from his hands and face. Everything felt very cold, colder than it was before. The light shook as his hand holding the phone incessantly trembled. He pointed his phone at the person walking forward from behind the car. Is he dead?" Eve asked Blondie as she came into view. Somehow, he wasn't surprised that she showed up. Her stunning beauty almost beat back the sheer terror coursing through his veins. But the blood on her clothes and arms brought him back to reality. She didn't answer his question, the answer was already obvious. Eve didn't know why he even asked it. The blonde woman stopped beside the passenger's window and pulled out something from inside the car. It was a bloody shovel. Eve didn't need to be told it was Corey's blood on it. He tried to stand up and run, but his legs wouldn't listen to him, they just spasmed beneath him without any strength, as if he had an intense leg workout the day before. As certain death stared at him in the face, his mind cleared and everything clicked. Why did I come here? Even before descending the small hills, he should have known that this wasn't the way to escape. In his fear-stricken mind, Eve didn't wonder why the car was moving toward the gasoline station from the street. Enrico and the others wouldn't have parked that far by the road just to walk all the way here. It was clear to him now that Corey probably saw something that scared him, and he tried to escape. But Blondie caught up with him. Eve had no clue how that happened and killed him. She was pushing the car back to the station, probably to hide it, when Eve saw its headlights. His lips and jaws trembled as he spoke. Are you human? If you're human, maybe you can." He stopped himself. That's a stupid question. She definitely wasn't. He could be dead in a few seconds, and he was the most scared he had been in all his life, but there was a wave of bravery he never thought he had in him. It calmed him down and allowed him to think more clearly. "I'm not dead yet." Maybe there was a chance he could plead for his life with this Adumbri. He prayed in his head, "Mother Core, if you're real, please let me get out of this alive." Eve took a deep breath and tried again. I am sorry about back then at the diner. They told me to, I was scared of them, so I followed them. I didn't mean to offend you, I swear. And I'm really sorry." The blonde woman didn't respond to his words. Instead, she asked him, "What's happening over there? What happened to my friend?" "Your friend?" She must mean the other Adumbri, the thin girl with black hair. He decided to answer truthfully. She turned into a monster." "Don't call her a monster." She stabbed the shovel into the hood of the car. "I'm sorry." With trembling arms and legs, Eve bowed down low. His phone was by his side, illuminating Blondie's legs. "I'm really sorry, I'm really, really sorry. I didn't mean to call her that." His forehead was sticking to the ground. He closed his eyes as he continued apologizing, expecting any moment to be his last. "Did you see her transform?" No, I didn't. Everything was dark, and I only saw her again when she turned back. Back? She walked closer to him. He still had his eyes closed, but he heard her footsteps. Back. Back to her, body before, with the black hair. Eve didn't want to mention the word human, because it might offend the Adumbri. Then that means she's not Blanchette anymore. She sighed in relief. There was a loud noise of tearing metal. Eve guessed she pulled the shovel from the car. That's good, she muttered. She has herself under control again. I'm sorry for everything, Eve repeated. Sorry. He clenched his fists. Should I make a run for it? No. She would catch him with her enhanced physical capabilities. On foot, he had no chance. But she's not hungry anymore. Blondie mumbled as she paced beside him, dragging the shovel around. He flinched as it rattled on the stones. So she doesn't need you guys anymore. Eve swiftly gathered his resolve. If there's a time for me to be brave, it should be now. He should surprise her, get in Enrico's car, push Corey's dead body aside, and then run her over. Yes. He was going to crash into her, then reverse back to the main road and drive away fast. She should be incapacitated enough not to chase him down as she did with Corey. First, I'm going to grab her legs and pull. Instead of grabbing my legs, she said, interrupting his feverish planning, you better close your eyes, and I'll give you a quick death. What did she say? Eve saw with the corner of his eye that she raised the shovel she carried. He was still bent down on the ground. Now or never. He reached for her legs. And the shovel head's edge bit into the back of his skull, continuing down to roughly cut his head in half. I think I got the hang of snapping necks, or not. Was there any video on the internet about this? Was I using the correct technique? I suspected that I was sort of brute forcing it rather than doing it correctly as I had seen in movies. But then again, I didn't know if it was possible to do in real life or if it was one of those things that only happened in movies. Kinda like cars always exploding when they crashed, or guns only need to be reloaded when a scene called for dramatic tension. These random thoughts floated around in my mind as I walked back to the store and the gas station using my phone to light the way. The darkness and the whistling wind were creepy, which was weird to think. I was the monster around these parts. A dirty monster that needs to change. My clothes and skin were crusty due to dried blood. Some were mine because Action Hero did manage to shoot me. It felt like I had a mud mask applied all over my arms and abdomen. I wanted to take a bath so bad, but we were miles from my family's condominium in Las Vegas. Good thing Dean brought a large jug of water with us. Before we left her house, I was teasing her for her over-preparedness, like we were going camping for a few days instead of going on half a day of driving. It turned out it was fortunate we had water with us. Mixing it with alcohol should be an effective way of wiping away all the blood since bathing was out of the question. The cool wind that was soothing and comfortable earlier now made the ickiness of the blood covering me more pronounced. Or it might just be that it was too cold with my thin torn shirt. It was the feeling of an incoming stomach ache. The small hills behind me seemed to be blasting the wind straight at me. Nearing the rotting store, I chased away my random musings and focused on the problems at hand, Dean, and these frat boys, both the living and the dead. Dean was reliable, probably. I hoped she restrained anyone trying to escape. It should be only Skull Tattoo Bro and that pathetic freshie left alive, unless Action Hero had other friends hanging around. I'd have to think of a way to finish off the survivors that would be palatable to Dean. Transforming back to Blanchette might be the way to go because she viewed us as two different people. I was going to be very pissed if Dean was suddenly bothered by her conscience and chose to let Skull Tattoo Bro and the freshie go. Chances were slim that she'd be forgiving to them, maybe to the freshie, but she might deem death too much punishment. She had a strong sense of justice. An annoying trait at times, but also occasionally useful as she defined her own justice and didn't simply follow what was socially acceptable. Like she decided it was the right thing to help me, an Adumbry, due to our friendship. Dean wouldn't jeopardize our safety because of morality and pity, would she? As for the dead bodies, I wasn't sure what to do with them. They were Alois University students, a bunch going missing would be newsworthy. Furthermore, some of the frat boys were related to very important people, so the police would care about if they were missing. If only they were random nobodies, then this situation wouldn't be such a headache. It would be easy to find the scene of the crime. My crime. Let's see. If it were me and I didn't have any knowledge of police methods, I'd track the last signal of the cell phones of these boys. Oh well, impulsiveness. It wasn't like I could turn back the time now. Risk? Danger? I couldn't say I was prudent about stuff like that when I was still human. But now, even less so. It was just that, everything around me, everything I had experienced since that fateful day at the Sanders Mall parking area, changed how I viewed the world. Okay, I could count my near-death experiences, but they were so many times that the threat of death was becoming stale. If the police showed up at my condominium in Vegas, suspecting me as an accomplice for the murder of these frat boys, they'd never consider my cute and pretty face to be the actual perpetrator. My reaction would be, seriously? Just like how university life and careers, those normal stuff crap, were the furthest thing from my mind, I just didn't care about the mess I made here. Which was bad. Apathy could lead to death. Fine. I should exert some effort cleaning this stuff up. Dean and I can probably come up with something since we're both intelligent girls, I said with an amused snort. Then I gagged as the strong smell of blood and funkiness of organs from the corpses inside the store wafted in my direction. Maybe I shouldn't have eaten a lot at the diner. I stepped out from the side of the store and gazed at the gas station. Beyond the pumps were two vehicles, the pickup truck of the Creeper Troop and the car of Action Hero. I could see them somewhat because the headlights of the sports car were turned on. Against the lights was the silhouette of a woman. I couldn't mistake that figure for anyone else. And her blonde hair shimmered against the headlights. It was Dean. But what was she doing? She bent down and was dragging something on the ground. It was hard to tell because of the distance and a couple of pumps obstructing my view, but I think it was a body from its form. A dead one? Must be one of these ACO guys. It wasn't a surprise that Dean killed a human because I knew she had done it before. Or rather, I was just assuming killed some of the 2MS goons that came for her the night my condo was attacked. That was a different scenario though. These guys were just innocent. Well, not exactly innocent. But they were far from armed men wanting to kill him. They had guns and were going to do nasty shit to us. Not so different then. I really shouldn't be surprised Dean killed them. She must have gotten all of them if she was moving leisurely as stuffing a corpse into a car could be. We're partners in crime now, I happily celebrated in my head. It was one thing to hide a criminal family member or close friend. Many would do that instinctively despite knowing it was wrong, especially if the criminal was an Adumbri. It was a whole different matter to actually kill someone. That was an insanely huge leap that most people wouldn't take, even for a loved one. But Dean did it for me. She'd surely be a very, very loyal pawn. And useful too, especially with her guardian angel. Elated with something finally going my way, I flashed my light around to see if I could find someone else Dean had killed. I wasn't sure who was the person she decapitated, but there should be at least one more person around here. Skull tattoo bro. I whispered as I spotted a body lying by the entrance of the store. It had a familiar arm decorated with an ugly tattoo. Well, what has Dean done to you? His face was unrecognizable, not that I could recall what he looked like. His features were rearranged by a powerful blow and obscured by blood, and his ankles were bound together by chains tethering him to a wooden post of the store. Dean did this? She must have been really angry with him. I looked over in her direction. She was pushing the red sports car with the dead body inside. Bodies. The driver's side of the windshield was covered with something that might be blood. She still hadn't noticed that I was already here. As much as I wanted to be the one to beat up this bastard who insulted me, Dean probably had more right to his life than I did. If he was still alive. I kicked him, but he didn't move. I stepped on his knee. It felt a bit weird, like some stuff were out of place, loosely moving around, and put pressure on it. Gradually, I increased the force until I heard bones crack. Still no reaction. Would someone unconscious wake up from pain? Someone under anesthesia wouldn't wake up if they were cut open during surgery. Although that probably didn't work the same way in this case. I shone my phone's light on Skull Tattoo Bro's chest to check if it was moving. But since I couldn't really tell, I decided to kneel beside him to check. As I bent my knees, someone called out to me. "Erend! Erend!" Dean exclaimed as she ran around the car. "Oh my God, you're back." Her arms were wide open. I wanted to avoid the impending hug but decided to give her this moment as a congratulatory gift. Her arms wrapped around me, and she held me close like we hadn't seen each other in years. I wasn't sure if she'd realize she was exerting a bit of her super strength. Dean, you're hugging me too tight." "Sorry." She loosened her hug. Sorry. Did I hurt you?" "No." My head was bowed down, as if ashamed of what I had become. When my arms could wiggle a bit, I hugged her back. Not as intensely as she did, but a hug nonetheless. She should know this was a big deal coming from me. I wanted to convey that she was the only one I could rely on. Dean was the type of person who wouldn't let anyone down, more so if they were desperately dependent on her. I should reinforce this personality of hers. We hugged for several seconds. To me, who disliked physical contact, it seemed like millennia. "Erend," Dean softly said. She stroked my hair to comfort me. "Are you, okay now?" She held my shoulders and stepped back. Looking over my body, she said, "There's blood on you. Were you hurt?" "They shot me, and that's why I turned to Blanchette, my anger." That wasn't exactly what happened, but it sounded cooler that way. I closed my eyes to seemingly push away bad memories. "These tears on your shirt, did they do anything to you?" I looked down. Right. I tore my shirt to look injured and helpless when I approached the backup frat boys. And now Dean thought that they assaulted me or something. No, I said. That's not what happened. I tore my shirt when I transformed back to my original body. I was still struggling with the anger and rage in my mind and then just sort of clawed myself as I tried to regain control. "I see. I'm glad you have turned back. Are you still feeling anything weird?" "No. I don't think so." Then with a firmer voice, I assured her. "I'm fine. I'm in control now." "That's good to hear. I was so worried about you." "Dean, what do we do about all of this?" I whispered as I stared around in a bit of a panic, allowing my voice to rise in panic at the end. "First, let's calm down." She patted my shoulder. Taking charge, as was the natural thing for her to do, she continued, "Let's check if everyone is accounted for. 6 people were from the pickup truck. 3 from the red car. So that's 9 in total, right? Can't believe I'm doubting my math for something so simple." I weakly chuckled at her joke. "Yeah, there are 9 of them I think. Action Man had 1 friend left by their car. How many did you kill?" "No. I mean. Dean." I looked up and met her eye. I gave her the most determined gaze I could muster, putting the facade that I was trying to be strong. "I know what I did. Don't dance around the topic. This is my life now. I can't keep running away from it forever." Yeah." She faltered at my intensity. "If I face reality, maybe I can control myself more," I told her. "So, yes. I killed them. Even though I had transformed, I can vaguely remember what was going on. The 6 guys from the pickup truck entered the store. I killed 2 of them. 4 escaped. We reconstructed a timeline of events and confirmed that all 9 guys were accounted for and dead. I gave her a sanitized version of what I could remember, while the Adumbri had taken over my mind. If I wasn't wrong, Dean probably wasn't telling me the complete side of her story either. "They're all dead," Dean said. "Let's now decide what to do with." "Dean, wait a bit. Is he really dead?" I pointed at Skull Tattoo Bro. According to Dean, she hit his face with the shovel because he was screaming when Action Hero and his sidekicks arrived. I'm not actually sure, Dean said. It doesn't look like he's still breathing. She stomped on his chest with such force that it caved in. Several bones cracked like we were inside an ad on TV for the crunchiest chips. She removed her foot as blood-soaked Skull Tattoo Bro's shirt. Some of his fractured ribs must have pierced through his skin when his chest got compressed. There, she said, giving me a reassuring smile. He's dead. Anyway, let's go back to deciding what to do here, she said. I propose we burn everything. Where's the nearest fire station? I tilted my head to the right, gazing at the blaze in the distance reflected in the side mirror. Eventually, a passerby would report the random fire in the desert. We hadn't seen any other cars on the road so far. If we were lucky, no one would bother calling the police or the fire department before everything burned down. If someone would call the authorities, I hoped that a fire truck would take a long time to get here in the middle of the desert. Our traces would be burned before anyone can put out the fire, Dean told me, guessing what I was thinking about. Ah, right. I trailed off, pretending I had plenty of worry frolicking in my mind. The only evidence left behind is the tire tracks of this car. Maybe some of our footprints too. That's too little to lead any investigation to us, I think. There's no need to worry. You're right, I said, slowly shaking my head as if to clear my fake troubled head. It's just okay, I'm not going to overthink about it anymore. Remembering what happened at the Sanders Mall after we were attacked in its parking area, Dean suggested that we burn everything. She surmised that back then, our mysterious attacker had set fire to the mall to cover their tracks, and that sounded like a good idea for our situation. Of course, Dean still didn't know that it was Myra who tried to kill us. But she was right about the reason that the stupid group of hero wannabes, MC especially, burned down the mall. So, with the presumption that the police would eventually find the site of the massacre anyway, give or take a few days depending on how soon those frat boys were reported missing, might as well burn everything. The only downside was having the place discovered by the authorities earlier. By burning everything, I meant the vehicles, the bodies, and the store. Dean drove the pickup truck into the store, just crashing it through the wall. Then we worked together to push the car through the hole the truck made. There was a mangled body in the car's driver's seat. No way either of us was getting inside to drive it. Next were the bodies by the hills. If anything, it should be me who should shelter Dean from traumatic sights. At any rate, it cemented my belief that my best friend was super reliable and was indeed my best friend. Although there was just this nagging feeling that something wasn't exactly right with her. She killed 3 people, 3 normal humans at that. And she didn't really seem that bothered at all. Given what I knew of Dean, I'd expect her to agonize over this. Perhaps she was dealing with this issue inside her mind, sparing me all the drama. That sounded like something she'd do. Fortunately, I didn't do my shtick of being a rabid, hungry Adumbry when it came to the 4 guys I killed by the hills. It would have been a huge mess dragging them back to the store if I had torn them into dozens of pieces. Dean dragged them 2 at a time, only having a bit of trouble with main character guy, the one whom I decapitated, the rest were in sorta one piece. That's why she was asking me if I wasn't hungry anymore. It puzzled me back then since we had just eaten at the diner. I thought she wanted us to eat at another restaurant to calm my nerves down or something. Only now did I realize the meaning of Dean's question. She noticed that I didn't eat the bodies outside the store. I told her that I wasn't hungry, and I now knew why she was so relieved by my answer. After Dean dumped the bodies into the back of the truck, we wiped the blood on our skin and changed our clothes. The mixture of rubbing alcohol and water did the trick. The cool minty feeling left by the rubbing alcohol made me forget the disgusting crustiness of dried blood. We threw our bloodied clothes and towels into the store and lit it on fire. The gasoline cans we found inside the pickup truck surely came in handy. The rotting dry wood made our work easier. Driving away from the large blaze was sort of like the equivalent of walking away from an explosion in movies. In all, I was very satisfied with the ending to this night. Night or day? Should I ask Dean about it, or would I sound stupid? Have you completely healed? Dean asked. Yeah, I said. In a few seconds, my bullet wounds were already gone. She was probably just concerned with me. Typical Dean. Even if we heal really fast, it's still painful if we get injured. As your friend, naturally, I don't want you to get hurt. That's true. Should I ask about her injuries too, like a good friend? When we were changing clothes, I noticed that the blood on her shirt didn't look like splatters. I was no forensic blood expert or whatever those crime scene investigation people were called, but I could tell she had bled. With her guardian angel, there was no way she would have gotten shot. Unless she allowed herself to get hit. She probably let herself get shot as penance for killing some of those frat boys back there. Well, if that's her thing, I won't judge her stupidity. Just forget about everything here, okay? Dean softly said. I meekly nodded. The fire disappeared on the horizon. Look, the sun is starting to show up. She nodded ahead. There was a hint of light in the sky. It's been a long night. So, it really is considered night, I thought. And then the day would begin when there was light. Another random question was answered. This might be a sign of good things to come. Yeah, really a long night. And we still have probably an hour until we reach Vegas. Maybe an hour and a half. I groaned. I really want a hot bath and then have a nice long sleep. You should take a nap for now. I'll wake you up when we're in Vegas. But what about my turn to drive? That was our agreement when we left La Esperanza, right? We take turns. I should drive. No, it's fine, Dean said. You need some rest. And I'm not sleeping. Just a 30-minute nap then, I said as I took off my glasses. I wore them while we were searching the sand for stuff that we might have missed, like cell phones and other items that the ACO guys could have dropped. I placed my glasses in the glove compartment and shut my eyes. I'm going to take over later. Sure, she replied. We might be somewhere near civilization by then, she added with a chuckle. I breathed a contented sigh as I slumped in my seat. Overall, it was a fun new experience. Well, I had experienced a ton of new stuff since that stupid day I met Myra's Adumbry sister. But I didn't mean that kind of new. I was referring to a new face I wore, the face of a normal girl who turned out to be an Adumbry. It was such an exciting face. However, I still wasn't certain of the interaction of my rules. Wearing the face of an Adumbry, I was expected to be an evil monster, killing people and that kind of stuff. Rule number 7, don't do anything that would break the character of the face I have on. But how should I act in relation to rule number 4, I wouldn't bother the world if it wouldn't bother me? Those two rules seemingly clashed with each other when it came to my girl secretly an Adumbry face. Good thing those jackasses earlier had bothered me first, so any conflict was averted. But I should settle this problem for the next time I wore that face. I had lots of fun with it that I might try it out again someday. Well, what's going on? I grumbled. My voice was hoarse from having just woken up. The incessant honking of horns made my head hurt. I blinked away the sleepiness from my eyes as I stared outside. Cars, buildings. Lots of cars, and lots of buildings rising way up in the sky. Attached to these buildings were dozens and dozens of screens displaying brightly colored ads. They sold products ranging from the latest phones to the most advanced bio-augmentronics. Services were also shown, like limbs extension and replacing organs with mechanical ones. It was like the buildings were trees in a concrete jungle and the screens were the canopy. Oh, you're awake. Dean said. It was the noises from the traffic, huh? Anyway, welcome to Las Vegas, the Bio-Augmentronics Center of America. We're in Vegas already? I said. The drone flying above our car, projecting a commercial about a cleaning robot, was enough to tell me where we were. Most cities wouldn't allow anyone to fly drones over main roads, but here, everyone with a permit could do it, and they gave almost everyone a permit. It was such a crazy place. And we're just in time to catch the start of the early morning rush. Hey, you didn't wake me up. You said you were going to take a 30-minute nap. And then it became an hour and a half. Was I supposed to wake you up? Yeah. I was supposed to take over driving from you. You were having such a good sleep, I didn't want to interrupt you. Thanks. I did have a good sleep. So, where are we going? Dean asked. I remember you mentioned the name of the condo building was Premier Highlofts. But when I checked the map, there are 4 of them, 1 Premier Highloft, 2 Premier, and so on. 1 and 2 are on the same, but the last 2 are in different addresses. Let's switch seats, I said. Huh? I'm going to drive there. No, just tell me where to go. Oh, come on. Switch seats with me, I insisted. I squeezed myself between the 2 front seats to get into the back of the car. The traffic's not moving. Whatever, Dean said. But she did transfer to the passenger seat. I climbed back to the front and plopped my butt on the driver's seat. You're supposed to be my guest here, so I'm the one who should drive and show you around town. This looks pretty nice, Dean said as we entered the main lobby of the condominium building. Nothing had changed since the last I'd been here, but it wasn't like I was gone for a long time. Last December, Mom and I stayed here during Christmas. And that was like only 2 months ago. I wasn't sure if this lobby was bigger than my condo at La Esperanza. If one was going to be technical about it, this place was indeed bigger due to the fact that my other condo had burned down. This place looked a bit newer though. But that was probably because it was brighter, with all the off-white tiles, the massive chandeliers that were turned on even during the daytime, and the lofty floor-to-ceiling windows lining the facade. There were also more plants here. Palms bigger than me were inside ceramic pots so large they could be cauldrons for witches. Each pot had a unique tribal-looking carving. Yes, it is nice, I said. Do you have an ID or something? Said Dean. How do we get into your room? Mom called them in advance. They know I lost my ID and keys. Plus, they know what I look like anyway. Awesome. She cheerily said. She pulled her luggage and walked ahead. Let's go. I'm excited to see your room. This is the first time. A loud crash made us turn to our right. A person wearing a hoodie had walked into one of the potted palms, probably distracted by something. He hugged the pot to steady it and moved it back into place. Then he briskly headed to the front door and exited the building. I bet he was staring at Dean, I thought with a smirk. That was the reason he quickly left in embarrassment. What were you saying, Dean? First time doing what? First time having a sleepover at a friend's house, she said with a huge smile. I mean, I'm not really sleeping over at your place. More like actually staying here for some time. But I'd like to think that it's a sleepover. Are you really serious that you haven't been to a sleepover before? You haven't been invited to one? You're like a queen bee. Everyone should be honored to have you over. I do have sleepovers at my house, said Dean. I noticed she didn't try to refute that she was a queen bee. But my parents won't let me go to a friend's house. Ugh, her parents. I seriously didn't care whatever family issues she had. I guess for the first night at my place, you can sort of think of it like a sleepover. It's going to be fun. Cue in generic pop music blaring to a wide camera shot of the building. Then it'd slowly zoom out to the whole bustling city, kicking off a movie about 2 girls partying in Las Vegas, ending in them finding their true selves. I wasn't a fan of coming-of-age movies. Dean and I were more than 2 decades old, we had come of age a long time ago. But after a horror movie escapade in the desert, with me starring as the monster, I was hoping for something more relaxed. I'm jinxing myself, aren't I? So, you won't be getting the security deposit of your leased condo back? Mom sternly asked on the phone. I haven't asked them yet, Mom, I replied. The truth of it was I hadn't even thought of stuff like my lease contract, the security deposit, unpaid utility bills, all those things connected to my destroyed condo unit. It had been hectic lately with all the fighting and killing that those things just slipped my mind. I'd think most people would agree that an Adumbri Titan was a more pressing matter than a security deposit. Obviously, I couldn't tell Mom that. Barely 10 minutes had passed from the time Dean and I entered my family's condo unit when Mom called. The two of us were lounging by the living room, watching the news for any possible breaking news about the murders we had committed when my phone rang. Mom was about to board her flight in 15 minutes and wanted to check up on me. Well, you should ask them for your deposit, dear, said Mom. I will when I have the time, I replied. Which is probably never. I didn't even know how to contact the lessors. I couldn't remember their number, and my phone with my contact list was gone in the burnt ruins of the condominium building. I might have emailed them before, I had to check my accounts for that. It's just kind of awkward to ask them about it. I mean their property is destroyed and all that, so I feel bad asking. Money is money, Erin sweetie. You should be more assertive about things like these. That's 2 months of rent you should claim. And they should have insurance to cover property damage due to Adumbri attacks. What does the law say about those? That they're not acts of God. Or acts of the devil, as your Aunt Jenna would say. Adumbri attacks are still considered fortuitous events, Mom. They're usually not covered by insurance. There are special insurance contracts for Adumbri-related events, but those have a high premium so most people don't get those. Like nobody was expecting that Adumbri would show up at La Esperanza. I also wasn't expecting to get turned into one, I wanted to add. How would Mom react if she discovered I was no longer human? That I was an Adumbri who had killed many people? What would Dad think if he was still alive? If my suspicion was correct that Dad was taken by the Corbrings to work for them, then it'd be insane if he found out his daughter to be the enemy of humanity. Mom tooted. If they're responsible owners they should have taken out insurance that included Adumbri attacks even if it's more expensive. And whatever type of insurance they have, you're still entitled to your security deposit because your lease contract was terminated because the place was destroyed? Yes, dear. That reminds me. We should go find you a new place to stay when you eventually move back to La Esperanza. I hope the BID do their job well and clear that city of Adumbri. Cheryl gave me a list of places you could pick from. I want you to have a nice and secure place when you return to Alois University. If I won't go into hiding, I thought. There were too many possible threats that wouldn't poof away. The BID, the 2MS, the organization behind Dario, maybe the Corbrings wanted to hunt me someday too. Sure, Mom, was all I could say. Now that I was talking to Mom, I wasn't so sure anymore that I could easily leave and forget about her. To put an end to our conversation, I said, isn't it time for you to board your plane? In a couple of minutes, dear. Thank goodness my flight wasn't delayed. Or worse, cancelled. Dean and I will pick you up at the airport. But I think we'll get some sleep for now since we haven't had any yet. Okay then, get some rest. I'm so excited to see you later, Erin sweetie. And also your friend, Dean. I've brought you 2 gifts from Switzerland and also some things I bought here at the airport. Bye. Love you, dear. Okay, Mom. Goodbye. I paused for a few seconds, I love you too. I added. I stared at the phone screen for a few seconds. Wearing the face of a dutiful daughter wasn't too bad. Perhaps it'd be nice to do something normal after the craziness of the past few. Actually, since I became an Adumbri, everything had been crazy. Dean was curled up on the sofa chair on the other side of the coffee table. She had her eyes closed, probably trying to sleep or maybe pretending to sleep so she wouldn't seem to be eavesdropping on my call. She opened her eyes after hearing me say goodbye to Mom and raised her brow at me. Mom is at the Singapore airport, I told her. She says her flight will arrive here around 10 in the evening. Oh, it's going to be fun to fetch her from the airport, Dean excitedly said as she sat straight up. Fun. Aren't you happy to meet your mom again? And I also want to meet her. Oh, that's what you mean. Yeah, I guess it's going to be fun. Are you worried? Dean softly asked. About what? About your mom finding out that, like what happened to you? That you're not human. That I'm an Adumbri. I said. Dean nodded. No beating around the bush between the two of us, remember? Just say it straight. And to answer your question, yes, I'm worried about Mom knowing that I'm an Adumbri. I think any daughter wouldn't want their mother to know that they became a monster. Dean quickly responded with a passion, no. You're not a mons. But I am. I shouted her down. Her eyes were wide open, shocked by my uncharacteristic outburst. I closed my eyes and shook my head like I was having internal turmoil. Somehow, talking to Mom and pretending to be normal made me crave some drama. Sorry, Dean. I shouldn't have yelled. It's just that there's no point fooling myself. After what I did to those guys at that gasoline station, I can't be anything else other than a monster. Wow, award-winning line, right there. Give me a nomination for Best Actress already. Dean got up from her chair and knelt beside my leg. She held my hand on my lap. I flinched but didn't pull away. After all, I was supposed to be distraught, and I'd naturally be open to the only person I could rely on that was Dean's view of the situation anyway. Errand, no matter what you are, she said, I'll be here for you. I feel like we've had this conversation several times already, I said with a weak smile. How about we don't talk about stuff like this anymore? No sugarcoating stuff, no more hesitation, and all that. I'm going to accept who I am. And I'll be by your side no matter what happens. Don't forget that. Dean patted my hand before returning to her chair. What else did you talk about with your mom, she said, probably trying to steer the conversation to something normal. It seemed like a long call. A bunch of stuff, I replied. And she just really misses me. Then I told Dean that Mom lectured me about the dangers of driving at night, like accidents and dangerous men. We had a good laugh about the dangerous men part. It was awkward at first, and in really, really, really bad taste, but we eventually viewed the whole incident with those frat boys as a joke. I couldn't tell if Dean was pretending to find it funny because I was also pretending to find it funny or if she genuinely thought it was. For all I knew, she assumed I was slowly turning evil due to the Adumbri inside me and decided now wasn't the time to try to change me. And so, she was just going with the flow to avoid any conflict between us. But I also wouldn't be surprised if she was becoming bloodthirsty given how mercilessly and violently she killed those guys. I was shocked when she finished off Skull Tattoo Bro with no hesitation, pressing down his rib cage with her foot. Did Dean have this scary side to her all along? We chatted about all sorts of random things while watching the news. There was nothing about missing assholes, nothing about mysterious fires in the desert, nothing about suspected Adumbri. Eventually, we just drifted off to sleep in the living room. I opened my eyes to a dimly lit room. The TV was turned off and the only source of light was the sun's rays peeking through a small gap between the heavy blinds covering the windows. Why do I have this on me? I muttered. I was lying on the sofa with a blanket over me. Turning to my left side, I saw that Dean was still curled up on the sofa chair with a blanket also covering her. She must have rummaged the cabinets to find blankets for both of us because I didn't give her any. I was such an awful host. And she also covered me, such a nice friend. My phone's clock told me it was almost 10. That meant we slept like babies for 4 hours. If I wasn't mistaken, there was a cafe or a bakery nearby. Mom and I had bought a cake there before when it had just opened. Hopefully, they continued their business. I did like the stuff they sold. Dean. I quietly called to her, not really intending to wake her up. I'm just going out to buy food. She didn't stir. Was her guardian angel also asleep, or how did their whole thing work? Would it wake her up if there was danger? I was tempted to try to punch sleeping Dean to test her powers. But then I relented because I was supposed to be nice to my first ally. She did cover me with a blanket. I don't think we have any food here, I said as I stood up. The pantry should be empty, and so was the freezer. Mom wasn't living here, and neither was I, so we didn't stock the place. I'd buy Dean some proper food, and then maybe we could go do some grocery shopping before Mom arrived. As I walked across the lobby, I noticed a couple of janitors struggling to move one of the potted palms in line with the others. I didn't realize it was that heavy. That hoodie guy ogling Dean earlier bumped into it. It must have been my imagination that he moved it. Could also be that some of them were just not that heavy. I walked out into the busy and gratingly noisy street outside. After about 5 minutes of circling, I managed to find the store I was looking for. Divergent Boulangerie was its name. It was a cafe selling baked goods. I could also get coffee for Dean and tea for me to perk us up. Wow, there's a lot of people here, I mumbled as I stepped through the black-tinted glass door with a fancy coffee cup and croissant decal. It was a small store with a long wooden table by its window overlooking the street and 4 circular tables in the middle. All the seats were occupied and there was a long line to the cashier. There was also a bunch of people in front of the display cases, choosing their orders. This must mean that they served excellent food and drinks here. But I hated crowds, so I was out of here. Adios, people packed like sardines. I turned around to exit the door just when someone was entering. Oh my God! She exclaimed as she hit me. Since she was taller and bigger, I decided that I should fall on my ass. Ouch! That hurt, I said. The people lining at the cashier looked at me. My debut performance in Las Vegas. I finally made it to the big stage, I dryly thought to myself. I'm so sorry. The woman exclaimed as she extended her hand to me. Are you hurt? I didn't see you. I hope so, I mentally vented as I accepted her hand. It would be worse if she saw me and still bumped into me, I sarcastically wanted to tell her. I was hungry and not in the mood for social interaction, yet she forced me into this situation. I even had to fall. But all I said was, it's okay. My butt just stings a bit. I smiled at her to show I was being humorous. I'm really sorry, she said as she pulled me up. She had long black hair, even blacker than mine, and it was straight in contrast to my natural waves and South Asian features. If there's anything I can do to make it up to you. I'm fine, I said, dusting off my behind more to remind her about her mistake rather than my shorts being dirty. You don't need to do anything. It was just an accident. If this was a romantic comedy movie, I would have bumped into a guy. I wasn't too sure how those went since I rarely watched them. The last time I did was during a movie party in college I had to attend because of societal obligations. Even this cafe was the perfect setting for a destined movie encounter, right down to her offering to make it up to me. I insist, she said. I can get you a coffee. Are we getting filmed here? It was just one cliché after the next. I was just about to leave, I said. The line is too long. Thanks for the offer though. I hurriedly exited the store before she could reply. Okay, time to find food and... Excuse me. It was that woman again, and she followed me. It was going to look weird if I ran away after seeing her, so I waited for her to catch up. You're right. The line is long and I'm already hungry. I know a place with also good food, but fewer people. I can treat you there as an apology. You don't really have to, I said. What was wrong with this person? My name is Imani, by the way, she said. I don't think I've introduced myself. Come, the other store is just a block away. I don't care and don't want to know who you are, I grumbled in my head. My name is Erin, I said, wearing the face of a polite average girl one find on a warm day in Las Vegas. Okay, I'll follow you. I just accept her offer to not go against my generic face and then go back to the hotel and finally eat in peace. Oh, wait. Dean is there. So not in peace. Ugh.